Tonight, you are invited to leave the day behind. You do not have to leave it perfectly. You do not have to understand everything that happened, finish every thought, or prepare an answer for every question waiting beyond this room. You may simply allow the day to become a little more distant. Settle into whatever position feels comfortable. Let the surface beneath you carry more of your weight. Allow your hands to rest without holding anything. Let your jaw soften. There is nowhere else you need to be for these next few moments, and nothing needs to be solved tonight. Our story begins beside a lake beneath a very large moon. The moon had risen before the traveler reached the final bend in the mountain road. It hung above the dark ridges like a pale lantern, so large and clear that the smallest shadows upon its surface could be seen. Below it, faint ribbons of green and violet light moved slowly through the sky. Thin clouds traveled beneath those colors, touching the moon's edge and continuing on. The traveler's name was Anika. She had walked since late afternoon, carrying a small cloth bag and a mind that felt much heavier. The road had not been difficult. It curved gently between cedar trees and low stone walls. Yet every step had been accompanied by thoughts that would not remain quiet. She remembered words she had spoken 3 days earlier and arranged better versions of them. She imagined conversations that might take place tomorrow and rehearsed answers to questions nobody had asked. She inspected old choices as though one more careful examination might cause them to change. When the road climbed, she wondered whether she had taken the wrong path. When it descended, she worried that she would have to climb again. When the trees opened and revealed the moon, she barely noticed it because she was deciding what she would do after she arrived. Then, the road turned one final time, and the lotus lake appeared below her. Anika stopped. The lake was wider than she had imagined. Its surface was dark blue, almost black where the mountains reflected upon it. Hundreds of round lotus leaves rested upon the water. Some lay flat and still. Others tilted at their edges whenever the faint breeze passed. Pale pink flowers rose between them, their petals holding small beads of moonlight. Across the water stood an open temple pavilion. Its roof curved upward at the corners, and warm lanterns hung between carved wooden pillars. A stone bridge crossed the narrowest part of the lake, joining the path to the temple steps. Every lantern had a second life in the water below, stretched into long lines of amber light that narrowed and widened with each ripple. Anika had been told that travelers could sleep at the temple. She had imagined a plain building, a mat, and perhaps a cup of tea. She had not expected the lake, the lanterns, or the great moon floating above them. For several breaths, her thoughts paused, not because she had defeated them, but because the scene before her was larger than the small room in which they had been circling. Near the beginning of the bridge, an elderly woman was trimming the wick of a lantern. She wore a simple grey robe and moved with the care of someone who did not believe that any task was merely in the way of the next task. When the wick burned evenly, the woman replaced the glass and looked toward Anika. "You have arrived," she said. Anika bowed slightly. "I hope I am not too late." The woman glanced at the moon, as if asking it to confirm the hour. "Too late for what?" Anika had no answer. She looked down at the road, dust upon her shoes. The woman smiled. "I am Suri. I keep the lanterns, sweep the bridge, warm the tea, and perform several other important duties that the lake would manage perfectly well without me." Anika introduced herself and explained that she had heard the temple offered a place to rest. "It does?" said Suri. "Can you rest?" Anika nearly said yes. It was the sort of question to which yes seemed polite, but the lantern light was warm. The night was quiet, and she was tired of pretending that tiredness and rest were the same thing. "My body can stop," she said. "My mind does not." Suri nodded as though Anika had said that one of her shoes was wet. "Then we shall not demand that it stop. Demands make noisy guests." She lifted the small lantern from its hook and began walking across the bridge. Anika followed. The stones retained a little warmth from the day. On either side, lotus leaves moved softly against the water. The bridge arched high enough that, at its center, Anika could see the temple reflected almost completely below them. The reflected pavilion trembled whenever a ripple passed, its pillars bending and its lanterns breaking into fragments of gold. "It looks as if the temple is falling apart," Anika said. Suri stopped beside her and looked down. "Does it?" Anika looked from the disturbed reflection to the real pavilion standing unchanged beyond it. "Only in the water." "Many things fall apart only in the water," Suri said. "We will speak of that later." At the far end of the bridge, stone steps rose toward the pavilion. A young woman sat upon one of the lower steps with her back to the path. Long, wavy blonde hair fell over a midnight blue robe. She faced the moon and did not turn as Anika and Suri approached. Anika lowered her voice. "Should we be quiet?" "We should usually be quiet," Suri replied. "But not because of Mira. She is watching the moon, and the moon has survived a great deal of conversation." Mira remained still. Only the ends of her hair moved slightly when the breeze crossed the steps. Suri led Anika to a small room opening from the rear of the pavilion. A woven mat had been laid upon the floor. Beside it stood a low table, a bowl of water, and a folded blanket. The window faced the lotus lake. "This is more than enough," Anika said. "Enough is a peaceful amount," said Suri. She poured tea from a clay pot. It smelled faintly of jasmine and roasted rice. Anika wrapped both hands around the cup and watched a thin curl of steam rise into the moonlight. For a moment, she was entirely present. The cup was warm. The steam moved. Somewhere beyond the room, water touched stone. Then a thought returned. What time should she leave in the morning? Another followed. Had she secured the window at home? Another asked whether the message she had sent earlier sounded impatient. Another began planning the quickest route down the mountain. Anika closed her eyes in frustration. "It has started again," she said. Suri sipped her tea. "What has started?" "The thinking. Thinking is what minds do." "But mine will not stop." "The lake does not stop being water because it ripples." Anika opened her eyes. "What am I supposed to do with the thoughts?" "Tonight? Very little." Suri placed her cup on the table. "A thought may knock at the door. You need not invite it to reorganize the room. You may hear it and remain where you are." Outside, a cloud moved slowly across the lowest edge of the moon. The lake darkened almost imperceptibly, then brightened again. Suri continued. "Your mind believes it is protecting you by remaining awake. It believes that if it examines yesterday carefully enough, yesterday may become safe. It believes that if it rehearses tomorrow thoroughly enough, tomorrow may arrive without uncertainty. We will not punish it for trying to help. We will show it that, for this night, its work is finished." Anika looked into her tea. A small reflection of the moon rested upon its surface. "And if it does not believe us? Then it may listen while we walk." Suri stood and lifted the lantern. "The temple has several stories. Stories give a busy mind somewhere gentle to place its attention. Later, when attention grows tired, Even the stories may be released. Anika placed her cup down and followed Suri back toward the lake. If you are still following closely, you may imagine walking with them. You may picture the warm lantern ahead, the quiet pavilion behind, and the bridge resting above dark water. You do not need to remember every detail. You do not need to search for a lesson. Let the words arrive and pass, like the reflections upon the lake. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The next step is enough. The next breath is enough. And for now, the night has only just begun. At the northern edge of the pavilion stood a small bell tower. It was not tall. 4 cedar posts supported a tiled roof, and beneath the roof hung a bronze bell darkened by many years of rain and incense smoke. A wooden striker rested beside it, suspended by 2 cords. The cords moved faintly in the breeze, though the striker did not touch the bell. Suri carried her lantern to a stone bench and sat. Anika sat beside her. "When is the bell rung?" Anika asked. "At dawn," said Suri. "Will it wake me?" "Perhaps." Anika looked at the bell and imagined its sound entering the small sleeping room. She wondered whether it would be loud. She wondered whether she would fall asleep before dawn. She wondered how many hours remained and whether those hours would be enough. Suri watched her face. "The bell has already rung in your mind," she said. Anika almost laughed. "I was only wondering about it." "How many times?" Anika considered this. In the space of several breaths, she had imagined the bell repeatedly. Harsh, sudden, close, unavoidable. More than once. "And the real bell has rung how many times?" "Not at all." Suri nodded. "Then the unrung bell has made more noise than the bronze one." They sat quietly. The cords continued their small movement. Beyond the tower, the lake accepted the reflections of the stars without trying to keep them. Suri told Anika of a merchant who once slept at the temple. The merchant had arrived during the rainy season. He was due to meet a caravan at dawn, and he feared that if he overslept, the caravan would leave without him. Before lying down, he asked the keeper whether the bell was reliable. The keeper said it had rung every morning for 83 years. The merchant was not reassured. "But what if tomorrow is the morning it fails?" he asked. The keeper promised to strike it personally. The merchant went to bed, yet every time he began to drift towards sleep, he imagined silence at dawn. He pictured opening his eyes to full sunlight. He saw the empty road, the vanished caravan, and the loss of his season's trade. He imagined returning home ashamed. Then he decided he must remain partly awake so he could detect the first hint of morning himself. Every bird call made him sit up. Every change in the rain sounded like footsteps leaving the courtyard. Several times he dressed, certain that dawn had come, only to discover that the sky remained dark. At last, exhausted, he fell asleep shortly before sunrise. The keeper struck the bell. The merchant woke immediately. He ran into the courtyard fully dressed because he had never removed his traveling clothes. The caravan had not yet arrived. He had lost nothing except the night he had spent trying not to lose the morning. "Was he angry with himself?" Anika asked. "For a while," said Suri. Then he began worrying that anger would spoil the day, and so he lost part of the morning as well. Anika smiled despite herself. What should he have done? He had already done what was reasonable. He chose a reliable place to sleep. He told the keeper when he needed to wake. After that, there was no further useful work available to him. Suri lifted one hand toward the bell. Preparation has an ending. Beyond that ending, preparation becomes rehearsal for pain that may never arrive. Anika thought about the message she had sent earlier that day. She had read it before sending it. She had corrected a confusing sentence. She had removed a word that sounded sharper than she intended. Yet after sending it, she had continued editing the message in her imagination, producing versions that could no longer be sent. "How do I know when I've done enough?" she asked. "You will not always know." The answer was so simple that Anika felt resistance rise within her. That is the problem. It is also the truth. Suri's voice remained gentle. The wish for certainty often dresses itself as responsibility. It says, think once more, and then you will be safe. But it rarely offers safety. It offers another thought. The breeze reached the bell tower and moved around them. Farther down the steps, Mira's hair lifted slightly at the edges and settled again. The bell remained silent. "Close your eyes," Suri said. Anika did. "Imagine the bell at dawn." Anika saw the wooden striker swing. She heard a deep bronze note spreading across the lake. Now let the sound fade. In her imagination, the note became softer. It traveled toward the mountains and lost its edges. Soon, only silence remained. "Again," said Suri. Anika imagined the bell. She allowed it one clear note, and then she let the note diminish. "A thought may be allowed to finish," Suri said. "We do not have to strike it again to make sure it was heard." They repeated this several times. Each imagined bell rang once. Each sound faded without being renewed. The exercise did not empty Anika's mind. Other thoughts appeared between the bells. Yet she noticed that she could allow an image to complete itself. She could choose not to begin it again immediately. If your mind is rehearsing something now, you may try the same gentle experiment. Let the thought appear without arguing with it. Hear what it is trying to say. Perhaps it says that tomorrow is important. Perhaps it says that something unfinished must not be forgotten. Perhaps it says that rest is dangerous because vigilance has kept you safe before. You do not need to push the thought away. You may simply answer, "I have heard you." Then allow its sound to become quieter. No need to strike the bell again. No need to rehearse the morning while the night is still here. Tomorrow may remain unopened. Suri and Anika stayed beside the tower until the moon had moved a little farther above the bridge. The bell did not ring. Its silence no longer felt like a sound waiting to attack the future. It was simply silence. When they stood to leave, Anika looked back once. The striker moved slightly upon its cords and came to rest. The bell had not changed, but it had become much quieter. From the bell tower, a narrow path followed the edge of the lake. Flat stones had been placed between beds of moss. Small lanterns stood at long intervals, leaving stretches of soft darkness between them. Suri walked without hurry. Anika began to notice the sound of her own footsteps and the cooler air near the water. After some distance, the path reached a cedar shelter containing a wooden bench. Suri set the lantern down. When Anika sat, she shifted suddenly and touched her left heel. "Is something wrong?" Suri asked. "A blister," Anika said. "I felt it earlier." She removed her shoe. The skin was red where it had rubbed against the edge of her sock. Suri opened a small compartment beneath the bench and took out a strip of clean cloth and a tin of salve. "Travelers have been developing blisters here for generations," she said. "The temple attempts to remain prepared." She handed the salve to Anika, who treated the sore place and wrapped it carefully. "I should have worn different shoes," Anika said. Suri waited. "I knew these might rub. I nearly changed them before leaving." Suri continued waiting. "And I walked too quickly on the lower road. If I had left earlier, I would not have hurried." Suri looked at the bandaged heel. How many injuries do you have? 1. I have heard at least 4. Anika frowned. Suri counted softly upon her fingers. The blister, the wrong shoes, the late departure, the hurried road. If we remain here, perhaps we can discover several more. Anika recognized the kindness beneath the teasing. I am making it worse. You are shooting a second arrow. Suri told her that people often meet pain twice. The first meeting is with what has happened. A heel is sore. Rain begins during a journey. A plan changes. Someone speaks carelessly. A memory arrives carrying sadness. The first arrow is the direct experience. It may be sharp, and pretending otherwise brings little peace. The second arrow is made from everything the mind adds. This should not have happened. It always happens to me. I should have known. Now the whole journey is ruined. What if the pain becomes worse? What does this say about me? The second arrow may be fired many times. Unlike the first, it is often held in our own hand. Anika looked at the strip of cloth around her heel. So, I should ignore the pain? No, we cared for the blister. That is a response to the first arrow. Kindness is not the same as resistance. Suri sat beside her. If a roof leaks, place a bowl beneath it and repair the roof when daylight comes. But there is no need to lie awake insulting the rain. Anika rested her foot upon the cool stone. The pain was still present, but it was small. Until Suri asked about it, Anika had almost forgotten it. Once she began blaming herself, the blister had expanded to contain her shoes, her departure time, the lower road, and an imagined failure of character. The second arrow feels useful, she said. It feels like learning. Sometimes reflection teaches, punishment merely repeats. How do I tell the difference? Learning usually becomes simple. Next time, choose the softer shoes. Punishment becomes a speech about who you are. Across the lake, a lantern reflection broke apart in the ripples and joined itself again. Suri continued. The mind often believes that if it causes enough pain after a mistake, the mistake will not happen again. But fear is a poor teacher when wisdom is available. Anika thought of nights spent replaying embarrassing moments. She had called this reflection, yet the scenes rarely gave her new information after the first few minutes. They merely returned with sharper language. What if the first arrow is a thought? She asked. A thought can arrive like weather. The second arrow is the belief that its arrival means something has gone wrong. Suri pointed toward a small cloud crossing the stars. A cloud appears. Then another thought says, the sky should be clear. Now, there is the cloud, and an argument with the cloud. They listened to the water for a while. Anika practiced naming what was directly present. There was a mild ache in her heel. There was cool air upon her hands. There was tiredness behind her eyes. There was uncertainty about tomorrow. When she used simple words, the experiences felt smaller and more honest. The ache did not become a ruined journey. Tiredness did not become another sleepless night. Uncertainty did not become disaster. If something is uncomfortable for you tonight, perhaps you can meet it in the same quiet way. There may be tension in the forehead or tightness around the eyes. There may be heaviness in the chest, warmth beneath the blanket, a sound beyond the room, or a thought asking to be followed. You do not need to call it pleasant. You do not need to call it terrible. Notice the first arrow with as few words as possible. Pressure, warmth, sadness, restlessness, remembering, planning. Then notice whether the hand is reaching for a second arrow. This must stop immediately. I will never sleep. Tomorrow will be impossible. I should be better at this. You may set that arrow down, not forever, not as a grand achievement, only for this breath. The first experience may remain while the argument softens around it. The rain may continue while the bowl quietly catches each drop. Suri helped Anika put her shoe back on. When Anika stood, the bandage protected the sore place. Better? Suri asked. Yes. Because the past changed? No. Because you found the perfect shoes? Anika smiled. No. Then perhaps care was enough. They returned to the path. Anika's heel touched the ground, lifted, and touched again. The ache had not vanished completely, but it no longer carried a story about what kind of traveler she was. It was one small sensation within a very large night. Above the mountains, the aurora moved slowly from green toward violet. The lotus leaves shifted and settled. Mira remained upon the temple steps, far behind them now, still facing the moon. Anika took another step. Only one arrow travelled with her. Before they left the Bell Pavilion, Suri showed Anika a narrow path climbing the hillside behind it. Small stone lamps stood at regular intervals, though only the first was burning. During the winter retreat, Suri said, a novice was asked to light this path before the evening meal. The novice looked toward the summit. 100 dark lamps disappeared into mist. He imagined carrying enough flame for all of them, protecting every wick from the wind, and reaching the final lamp before the meal grew cold. The size of the task made him sit down before he had lit even one. An older monk found him there. I cannot see how I will finish, the novice confessed. The monk lifted the small taper from his hand and lit the nearest lamp. Its light revealed the second. They walked to the second and lit it. From there, they could see the third. The novice kept looking uphill, but the mist refused to reveal the entire path. Each lamp showed only enough ground to reach the next. Halfway up, wind extinguished 3 behind them. The novice turned in alarm. Must we go back? The monk looked down. Travelers below were already relighting the lamps as they climbed. A path can be cared for by more than one pair of hands. They continued. At the summit, the novice discovered that the 100th lamp had already been lit by the cook, who had come from the opposite direction. The task he had imagined carrying alone had been meeting him from the other side. Suri touched the flame of the first lamp with a slender spill of wood. Then she used it to light the second. Overthinking often begins when the mind tries to illuminate the entire path with one flame, she said. It asks how every stage will unfold, how you will manage next week, next month, and the year beyond it, how other people will respond, how you will feel when an imagined moment finally arrives. No single lamp was designed for that work. Let this moment illuminate only the next one. Right now, the next moment may contain nothing more than one breath, leaving the body. After that, another small area of path will become visible. You do not need to carry 100 flames into sleep. Some lamps will be lit by morning. Some will be lit by people walking toward you. Some that go dark can be relit when they are needed. Anika watched the second lamp settle into a steady glow. The path above remained hidden, but the darkness no longer felt like missing information. It felt like a merciful limit. Only this circle of light. Only this patch of ground. Only the body resting here. The future did not need to be made visible from the pavilion. Suri extinguished the taper but left the 2 lamps burning. Enough light is not the same as all the light, she said. Enough is kinder. The breeze moved through the grass. Farther uphill, a 3rd lamp unexpectedly appeared. Someone unseen had lit it beyond the mist. Anika smiled. The path was not waiting for her effort alone. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The next lamp will appear when the next lamp is needed. Suri led Anika from the bell pavilion to a low landing at the edge of the river. Several wooden bowls rested upside down on the boards, drying beneath the moon. She chose the simplest one and placed it on the water. The current caught it gently. For a moment, the bowl circled beside the landing as though uncertain. Then it turned and began moving downstream. "A farmer once lived beside this river," Suri said. "One morning he placed his lunch in a bowl much like that one. Before he could eat, the bowl slipped from his hands and floated away." The farmer ran along the bank. Whenever the bowl passed close, he reached with a branch. But the current carried it beyond him. He followed it past the boundary of his field. He followed it through a grove and around a bend. All the while, he shouted at the river to return what belonged to him. At midday, he realized he had abandoned his work, missed his meal, and traveled farther than the bowl was worth. Still he continued because turning back would mean admitting that all the chasing had been unnecessary. Near sunset, the bowl became trapped among reeds. The farmer waded into cold water and retrieved it. He held it above his head in triumph. But when he looked inside, the food was gone, and the wood had cracked against a stone. An old fisherwoman watched from her boat. "Did you find what you were chasing?" she asked. "I found my bowl." "That was not my question." The farmer looked back upstream toward the field he had left untended. The next week, another object fell into the river. A straw hat. The farmer ran 3 steps, then stopped. He watched the hat turn slowly in the current and disappear around the bend. He felt loss. He also felt the ground beneath his feet. That afternoon, he finished his work beneath the sun. On his way home, he bought another hat from a neighbor, who became a friend. Letting go does not mean pretending the bowl was never yours, Suri said. It means recognizing when the river is carrying more than the object. It may also be carrying your evening, your attention, and your peace. Anika watched the temple bowl travel between silver reflections. There are things the mind follows downstream at night. A moment that cannot be repeated. A person who is moved beyond reach. An outcome that did not happen. A version of life that once seemed certain. The mind runs beside the river, believing one more argument, one more reconstruction, or one more hour of worry will bring it close enough to retrieve the past unchanged. Notice the chasing. Feel the effort in the jaw, the forehead, the chest, or the belly. Then stop on the bank. You are not required to call the loss insignificant. You are allowing the river to be a river. Suri pointed to the water behind the moving bowl. The current closed without leaving a wound. The river makes room by continuing. Perhaps you can make a little room in the same way. Let one image move farther from you. Let one unanswered question round the bend. It may return in another form tomorrow, but you do not need to follow it through the night. The bowl passed beneath a leaning branch. Soon it became only a dark curve upon the moonlit water. Anika expected anxiety as it vanished. Instead, she noticed relief mixed with sadness. Both could be present. Neither required pursuit. Breathing in, stand on the bank. Breathing out, let the current carry what is already moving. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The path descended until it met a narrow stream feeding the lotus lake. A small wooden platform had been built above the bank. Clay bowls of different shapes stood upon its shelves. Some were round and deep, some wide and shallow, and several leaned slightly to one side as though listening to the water. "Who made these?" Anika asked. "Travelers," said Suri. "There is clay beneath the eastern bank. People sometimes find it easier to rest after their hands have made something their thoughts did not design in advance." Suri selected a plain bowl and lowered it into the stream. Water entered, circled once, and became still. "A potter once lived in a village farther down this river," she said. "She made excellent bowls, but she worried constantly about drought. Each evening the potter filled every container in her home. This was sensible during the dry season, but when all the jars were full, she began filling cups. When the cups were full, she filled cooking pots, lamps that had never held water, and a wooden drawer that leaked across the floor. Still, she imagined tomorrow's thirst. One night she made an enormous clay vessel. It was too large to fit inside her home, so she built it beside the river. She intended to capture enough water for every possible future. For 7 days she worked without rest. On the 8th day, she fired the vessel. On the 9th, she lowered it into the river to fill. The vessel was strong, but the current was stronger. The rope slipped from her tired hands, and the enormous bowl began traveling downstream. The potter ran along the bank after it. "My water," she cried. "Tomorrow's water is escaping." An old fisherman watched the bowl float past. "That water was already traveling downstream," he said. The potter stopped. The great vessel continued around a bend and disappeared. When she returned home, she found all her ordinary jars still full. Rain began that night and continued gently for 3 days. "Did she stop preparing?" Anika asked. "No, she kept enough water for reasonable needs, but she stopped trying to store the entire river." Suri tipped the small bowl in her hands. Its water returned immediately to the stream. "The future is a river. We may fill a useful bowl. We cannot make the river remain." Anika thought of her own preparations, lists written for events months away, answers prepared for several possible reactions, plans hidden inside backup plans. Some had been useful. Others were enormous vessels built beside water that had not stopped moving. "If I do not prepare, I feel careless," she said. "Fill one bowl," Suri replied, "then let the river travel." They each chose a small piece of clay. Suri pressed hers between her palms without trying to make it symmetrical. Anika began carefully, smoothing one side, correcting the other, and returning to the first. Soon, she was holding a neat little bowl. Then, she noticed a shallow mark near the rim. Her thumb moved to erase it. "Will the mark prevent it holding water?" Suri asked. "No." "Will it offend the river?" "Probably not." Anika left the mark where it was. They placed the unfired bowls on an empty shelf. Neither would be ready tonight. The clay needed to dry before it could meet the kiln. "Some work improves when we stop touching it," said Suri. The stream continued beneath them. It carried moonlight over stones, broke it into small pieces, and carried those pieces onward. If tomorrow is asking for your attention tonight, you may imagine placing one small bowl beside the river. Put inside it anything genuinely useful. An appointment that is already written down. A task that can wait until daylight. One simple intention. Then allow the bowl to be enough. You do not need to store every possible conversation. You do not need to collect water for every imagined drought. The river will still be moving when morning comes, and you will meet it with the hands and understanding you have then. For now, let tomorrow remain unopened. Let the clay dry. Let the water travel. Farther along the shore, a small boat knocked softly against a post. Its rope had enough slack to let it drift a little outward, then return. Suri steadied it with one hand. "A scholar once crossed this lake every morning," she said. "He valued calmness and believed he had finally mastered it. One foggy day, while meditating in his boat, he felt another vessel strike the side. Anger rose immediately. Without opening his eyes, he began composing a speech for the careless boatman. The second impact was harder. The scholar stood and shouted into the fog. When the other boat emerged, he saw that it was empty. Its rope had broken upstream, and the current had carried it into him. His anger had nowhere to land. The boats had touched in exactly the same way, yet the discovery of emptiness changed everything. He laughed, then sat down again. For years afterward, whenever someone's words offended him, he pictured the empty boat. Not because people had no responsibility, but because he understood how much anger was supplied by the story he added. They meant to diminish me. They should have known. This proves what they think of me. Sometimes the other person was distracted, sometimes frightened, sometimes repeating pain they had not examined. Sometimes the collision truly required a boundary or repair. But the scholar learned to look before filling the boat with an enemy. Suri loosened the rope, and the temple boat drifted the width of an arm from the landing. "At night, the mind meets many empty boats," she said. A delayed reply, a brief expression on someone's face, a change in tone, a memory of words whose intention can no longer be checked. The collision is real. You feel it. Then the mind places a boatman inside and gives that imagined person motives, judgments, and future plans. Before sleep, let the fog remain. You do not need to decide what every collision meant. Anika remembered a friend who had seemed distant during their last meeting. She had spent nights deciding that the friendship was ending. Other explanations had occurred to her, but worry chose the cruelest one because it seemed safest to prepare for pain. Now she pictured a quiet vessel emerging through mist. For tonight, it could be empty. Tomorrow, she might ask a kind and direct question. Tonight, there was no boatman available to answer. Suri stepped into the boat and invited Anika to sit opposite her. They did not untie it. The rope allowed only a small, soothing movement. Water tapped against the hull. The shore moved closer, then farther, though neither woman traveled anywhere. This is how thoughts can feel in darkness, as though the entire world is shifting. Yet sometimes it is only a small boat rocking safely on its rope. Feel the support beneath you. Let the mind drift a little outward. Let it return. No need to force stillness. The rope is secure. If a memory bumps against you, notice the contact before inventing the captain. There is sensation. There is uncertainty. There is space before interpretation. Rest in that space. The boat moved in a rhythm too irregular to count and too gentle to fear. Above it, a cloud crossed the moon, dimming the water. Then the light returned without assistance. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The empty boat may pass. Beyond the stream, the path reached a narrow inlet. A weathered rowing boat had been pulled onto the bank and turned upside down. Moonlight rested upon its curved hull. Suri touched the wood as they passed. "This boat belonged to a man named Dev," she said. "He was famous for becoming angry before other people had finished making their mistakes." One foggy morning, Dev was rowing across the lake when another boat struck his side. He immediately shouted, "Watch where you're going. The lake is wide enough. What kind of fool steers directly into another person?" The fog concealed the other boat, so Dev shouted louder. He listed the damage that might have occurred and described the carelessness of strangers. Then the fog shifted. The boat was empty. It had slipped from its rope and drifted with the current. Dev's anger vanished so quickly that he found himself holding the next insult with nowhere to send it. The impact had not changed. His boat still carried a fresh scrape. Yet the discovery of emptiness removed the person he had constructed inside the event, the careless stranger who had chosen to inconvenience him. "So, nobody's responsible for anything?" Anika asked. "That would be another story," said Suri. "The empty boat does not excuse harm. It reminds us how often we invent an intention before we know what happened." Many days later, another rower genuinely behaved carelessly and crossed Dev's path. Dev felt anger rise again. Then he remembered the empty boat. This boat was not empty. A person sat inside it. But Dev understood that the person was also being moved by currents he could not see. Fear, distraction, tiredness, grief, habit, misunderstanding. Dev still called out to prevent a collision. He still asked the rower to take greater care. But he did not spend the remainder of the day carrying the stranger inside his mind. Anika looked across the inlet. She remembered someone who had failed to answer an important message. In imagination, she had assigned many motives to the silence: disrespect, indifference, punishment. The person had eventually explained that illness in the family had taken all their attention. By then, Anika had already argued with them for several nights. "The imaginary person can be more exhausting than the real one," she said. "The imaginary person never becomes tired of arguing," Suri replied. They sat upon the overturned boat. Mist lay close to the far bank, moving in separate ribbons between the lanterns. "Is there an empty boat circling your mind tonight?" Suri asked. Anika thought of the earlier message. She had imagined the reader misunderstanding it. She had imagined a cold reply, then prepared a defense. No reply had arrived. The entire conversation occupied a boat with nobody inside it. "Yes," she said. "Then let it drift through." Anika pictured the small boat emerging from fog. She saw that it was empty. She did not have to destroy it or pull it to shore. She allowed it to pass without climbing aboard. You may do the same with any conversation being rehearsed tonight. Notice whether the other person is actually present. Notice whether the words have actually been spoken. Perhaps there is only a boat made from prediction, drifting through the fog. You may let it pass. If a real conversation is needed, daylight can hold it. If a boundary must be spoken, you may speak it when the person is there to hear. If a misunderstanding needs care, it can be met with the information available then. Tonight, there is no need to answer an empty boat. The inlet became still. The mist continued along the opposite shore. Somewhere among the lotus leaves, water touched water with a sound too small to require a name. When they stepped ashore, Suri lifted a lantern from its hook and carried it to a shallow pool beside. The lake. Lotus leaves rested on the surface, their edges silver beneath the moon. She lowered the lantern until its reflection appeared in the water. Then she touched the pool with one finger. The reflected flame stretched, broke into fragments, and scattered across the ripples. "Is the lantern damaged?" she asked. "No." "Has the light become many lights?" "No." "Then what is broken?" "Only the reflection." Suri nodded. She told Anika about a village that kept a ceremonial lantern in its meeting hall. During a time of conflict, the villagers gathered beneath it to argue over the use of a shared field. Each person believed the others threatened the village. Voices rose. Old disagreements entered the room. By evening, no one could remember the original question clearly. Outside the hall, rain had filled a stone basin. A child watched the lantern's reflection tremble whenever drops struck the water. One of the elders stepped outside to breathe. The child asked why the lantern was afraid. "It is not afraid," the elder said. "The water is moving." Hearing her own words, she understood something. Inside the hall, everyone had been treating a disturbed mind as proof of a disturbed world. She returned and asked the villagers to sit quietly until they could hear the rain. The disagreement did not disappear, but when the inner water settled, they could see the actual problem rather than 100 broken reflections of it. By morning, they found a compromise no one had been able to imagine while defending against ripples. Suri moved her finger again. Rings travelled outward, touched the lotus stems, and returned in smaller patterns. "A tired mind produces convincing reflections," she said. "One worry becomes 10 possible disasters. One mistake becomes a portrait of the entire self. One uncertain hour becomes a permanent future. You do not need to repair each reflected fragment. That would be like reaching into the pool to assemble the lantern. Leave the image alone. The water knows how to settle when it is no longer being stirred." Anika watched. The broken shapes drew together gradually. No single moment could be called the moment of stillness. Movement simply became smaller until the flame appeared whole. Your mind may not become perfectly still before sleep. It does not need to. Even disturbed water reflects light. Even an anxious body can be held by a bed. Even while thoughts continue, rest can begin beneath them. Suri carried the lantern a few steps away. Its reflection vanished from the pool, though the pool remained. "Sometimes what disappears from awareness has not been lost," she said. "Attention has merely moved. You may move attention now from the story of a worry to its physical echo. Where is it felt? Perhaps as pressure behind the eyes. Perhaps as heat in the chest. Perhaps as a small pulling in the stomach. Meet the sensation without adding a prediction. Warmth is warmth. Pressure is pressure. Movement is movement. Let each be a ripple rather than a prophecy." The lantern returned to its hook. Across the lake, other lights made long paths upon the water. Every path trembled differently, yet all came from steady flames. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Let the water settle in its own time. When they returned toward the pavilion, the bridge appeared ahead of them, its lanterns forming an amber curve through the night. Suri stopped at the water's edge and lowered her lantern beside a flat stone. Its reflection shone clearly below it. She dipped one finger into the lake and drew a slow circle. The reflected flame stretched, divided and scattered into trembling lines. "What happened to the lantern?" she asked. "Nothing. But look at its light. The water is moving." They waited. The circular ripples widened and weakened. The reflection gathered itself, becoming a single flame again. "The light never broke," Suri said. "The water made a broken picture." Anika watched another faint breeze touch the lake. Every reflected lantern trembled at once, while the lanterns themselves remained steady upon their posts. "When the mind is disturbed," Suri continued, "we may examine its reflections and believe the whole world has become distorted. We make decisions about our lives from an image moving upon restless water. But sometimes life really is difficult. Yes, the temple is real, and so is the lake. The teaching is not that every problem is an illusion. It is that agitation changes the picture. We may wait for the water to settle before deciding that the pillars are bent." Suri told Anika about 2 sisters who inherited a lantern shop. The elder sister worried that customers disliked their work. Whenever a buyer hesitated, she saw rejection. Whenever someone left without purchasing, she saw failure. At night, she calculated how quickly the shop might close. The younger sister noticed the same events, but waited before naming them. Some customers returned with friends. Some had entered only to escape rain. Some admired a lantern they could not yet afford. The elder sister was not foolish. She was looking at real movements. But fear turned each ripple into a final answer. One evening, after a difficult week, she wanted to sell the shop immediately. Her sister persuaded her to sleep first. The next morning, nothing magical had changed. They still needed more customers. They still had decisions to make. But the elder sister could see several choices where the night before she had seen only collapse. The water had settled enough to show the actual shape of the room. Rest does not solve every problem, Suri said. It allows us to meet the problem that exists instead of every reflection fear places around it. Anika looked toward the pavilion. Mira remained seated on the steps, a small blue figure beneath the warm lanterns. Above her, the moon was partly veiled by cloud. Its reflection stretched across the lake in a silver path that changed with every ripple. "How do I make the water settle?" Anika asked. "You cannot command a lake to become still. You stop stirring it." They sat beside the lantern. Suri did not instruct Anika to force her breathing. She simply asked her to notice one full breath arriving and leaving. Anika felt the coolness near her nose as she inhaled. She felt the small release in her chest as she exhaled. Another breath arrived. The lake continued moving. Another breath left. Thoughts still appeared, but Anika did not draw circles around them. The message, tomorrow's road, the bell at dawn. Each thought touched the surface. Each was allowed to widen and fade without another finger following it. You may rest beside the same lake now. There is no requirement that your mind become perfectly smooth. A living lake moves. A living mind receives sensations, memories, and sounds. Simply notice when you are stirring the water again, retelling the conversation, predicting the morning, checking whether sleep is close, judging this breath against the one before it. For a moment, let the hand become still. The ripples know how to finish themselves. The reflection knows how to gather. The lantern has not broken. Neither have you. Suri lifted the lantern from the stone. Its reflection rose with it and disappeared from the water, leaving moonlight and the long amber lines of the bridge. They began walking again. Behind them, the final circle reached the reeds and was gone. As Suri returned the lantern to its hook, rain began so lightly that the drops were visible only where they crossed the flame. Anika looked toward the open path. "Should we wait for it to stop?" "We are already waiting," Suri said. "We may as well listen." They sat beneath the pavilion roof while the rain strengthened. It touched the lake, disturbed every lantern reflection, and filled the air with 1,000 small sounds. Suri told Anika about a village elder who disliked unfinished weather. Whenever clouds gathered, he wanted to know precisely when the storm would begin, how much rain would fall, and when the sky would clear. He questioned farmers, travelers, and anyone who claimed to read the wind. Their answers differed, so he trusted none of them. During one long storm, the elder stayed awake through the night listening for the final drop. He believed he could rest once the rain had officially ended. Near dawn, the sound became softer. He leaned toward the window, counting the spaces between drops. 1, 2, 3. Then another drop struck the roof, and he began again. His granddaughter woke and found him still counting. "Why are you helping the rain stop?" she asked. "I am not helping it." "Then it can finish without you." She returned to bed. The elder listened differently after that. The rain was no longer a task whose completion he needed to verify. It was weather performing its own movement. He fell asleep while drops still touched the roof. When he woke, the storm had ended without a witness. The mind treats many experiences as unfinished rain, Suri said. It listens for the final thought. It waits for the last trace of anxiety to disappear. It checks whether the body has become relaxed enough, the room quiet enough, or the hour late enough for sleep. Every check is another moment leaning toward the window. Let the rain finish without you. Thoughts can become fewer without being counted. The body can soften without being measured. Sleep can arrive before the final drop. Anika listened as rain joined the lake. No one drop could be followed after it touched the surface. Each became water among water. Perhaps your thoughts may enter awareness in the same way. One concern touches the mind, then another. Each dissolves into a space larger than itself. You do not need to identify the final one. The rhythm changed. A stream began running from one corner of the roof into a stone channel. Leaves leaned beneath the weight of water, then lifted when the drop slid away. Nothing hurried the storm, and nothing delayed it. For a while, Suri and Anika said nothing. The rain spoke in countless brief sounds, none requiring interpretation. Eventually the moon appeared through thinning cloud. Rain continued in the garden even while moonlight returned to the lake. Two kinds of weather could exist together, so calm and restlessness may exist together in you. Hope and tiredness may share the same night. Peace does not need to wait until every cloud has gone. The elder's granddaughter was right. The rain can finish without you. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. At the far edge of the pool, one lotus remained closed while every flower around it had opened. Anika noticed it because its pale bud leaned slightly away from the lantern light. "Is something wrong with that one?" she asked. Suri laughed softly. It has not consulted the others. She told Anika about a gardener who became worried whenever plants grew at different speeds. He measured each stem at sunrise and compared every flower with its neighbor. When one lotus opened early, he praised it. When another remained closed, he moved it into stronger sun. Then he added fertilizer. Then he loosened its petals with his fingers. The flower was damaged before it had the chance to open. An older gardener found him grieving beside the pond. "I only wanted to help it become what it was meant to become." "Then you should have protected its becoming," she replied, "not demanded its arrival." She showed him buds that opened at dawn and others that waited until the day was warm. Some flowers lasted only hours. Some returned season after season through roots hidden in mud. None hurried because another had bloomed. The next year, the gardener stopped measuring. He cared for water, soil, and shade, then allowed each plant its own timing. The pond became less orderly and more alive. Suri knelt beside the unopened lotus. "Human beings compare hidden seasons," she said. "You see someone else's flower and judge your own root. At night, comparison becomes especially persuasive. The mind lists what others have achieved, healed, earned, understood, or become. It decides that your life is late, but you cannot see the mud from which another flower grew. You cannot know which petals opened too early in order to please an impatient gardener. Your own life is not failing because something remains unfinished. Rest is part of becoming. Darkness is part of becoming. The closed bud is not doing nothing. Within it, structures too delicate to force are arranging themselves." Anika thought of all the ways she had tried to pull herself open, demanding immediate clarity, immediate healing, immediate confidence. She had called impatience ambition and exhaustion discipline. For one night she could tend the water instead. The water was this breath. The soil was the support beneath her. The darkness was allowed. No measurement was needed. Suri touched neither the flower nor the stem. Her care appeared as restraint. "Perhaps it opens tomorrow," she said. "Perhaps after we have gone. Its opening does not require an audience." This too can be comforting. Your healing does not need to perform. Your rest does not need to impress anyone. Sleep may arrive quietly, without a dramatic moment in which you notice it succeeding. Let the petals remain closed. Let the mind remain partly unfinished. Let this night nourish what cannot yet be seen. Nothing needs to bloom tonight. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Near the bridge, Suri stepped onto a narrow walkway extending between the lotus beds. The boards were low enough that the broad leaves floated almost beside their feet. Some flowers stood fully open beneath the moon. Others remained closed, their petals gathered tightly around centers not yet visible. Anika pointed toward a small unopened lotus. "Will that one bloom by morning?" "Perhaps," said Suri. "How can you tell when it is ready?" "It opens." Anika waited for a more complicated answer. Suri smiled. "A gardener cared for this lake many years ago. Every morning he inspected the youngest buds. He measured them with a thread and wrote the numbers in a book. If one had not grown, he worried. If another opened first, he worried about the slower flower. He adjusted the water, moved stones, and loosened petals with his fingers." "Did it help?" "He damaged several flowers while attempting to assist them. One evening, an old nun found him leaning over a bud with both hands. 'What are you doing?' she asked. 'Helping it open.' 'Did it ask?' The gardener said that plants could not ask. 'Then perhaps they also cannot be hurried by argument,' the nun replied. She showed him the work already taking place beyond his sight. Roots drawing nourishment from mud, stems carrying water, petals forming within their green covering. The lotus was not inactive simply because it had not performed its growth where he could watch. After that, the gardener still cared for the lake. He removed weeds, protected the roots, and kept the channels clear. But he stopped pulling at petals. Anika crouched beside the unopened lotus. "Rest can feel like nothing is happening," she said. "Much of the night's work is hidden," said Suri. "The body repairs without applause. Memory sorts itself without a meeting. The heart loosens around things while the conscious mind is elsewhere." Anika had often checked whether she was close to sleep. Each check woke the part of her that wanted an answer. She had pulled at the petals to see whether they were opening. "So, I should stop trying?" "Stop forcing. Rest is still an action, just not one that improves under supervision." They continued along the walkway. Lotus leaves tipped gently in the breeze and returned. The closed flower remained closed. It was not behind. It was not failing. It was performing quiet work within the shape of a bud. If sleep has not arrived yet, you are not behind either. You do not need to inspect the distance between wakefulness and dreaming. You do not need to ask whether the next breath will be the one after which you disappear into sleep. Leave the petals alone. Let the roots continue in darkness. Resting here is enough, even before sleep comes. Before Suri continued, she invited Anika to listen to the small sounds nearest to them. Not the waterfall across the lake, not the wind moving through the high branches, only the sounds within a few steps of where they sat. A reed touched the wooden landing with a soft, hollow tap. Water folded around the roots of the lotus plants. Somewhere beneath the steps, a tiny creature disturbed the surface and left 3 widening circles behind. The mind often travels far away because it believes the answer must be far away, Suri said. Yet peace generally begins with what is nearest. She told Anika about another monk who lived in the northern hills. Each evening he filled 2 clay jars from a spring. One jar was for the night, the other was for the following morning. During a season of drought, the monk began worrying that the spring might be dry when he woke, so he carried a 3rd jar for tomorrow afternoon, then a 4th for tomorrow evening. Soon he spent the final hours of every day walking up and down the steep path, carrying water for moments that had not arrived. The jars grew numerous. His shoulders became sore. His evening meal went cold while he worked. He stopped noticing the sunset over the hills because he was always calculating how much water his future self might require. One evening, an old potter found him struggling beneath a wooden pole from which 6 jars were hanging. "How many people live in your hut?" the potter asked. "Only me." "Then why do I see 6 men's burdens on your shoulders?" The monk explained the drought and the possibility that tomorrow's spring might fail. The potter placed a hand against one of the jars. "Is the spring dry now?" "No." "Are you thirsty now?" "No." "Then one of these jars belongs to you. The others belong to men who do not yet exist." The monk understood the words, but fear did not instantly leave him. Understanding is sometimes only the first loosening of a knot. He carried all 6 jars home that evening, but the next night he carried 5. The night after that, 4. Each time he left an empty jar beside the spring, he felt as though he were abandoning tomorrow. Yet every morning, tomorrow arrived as today. And when today required water, the monk walked to the spring and collected it. Eventually he returned to 2 jars, one for the present night and one for morning tea. His shoulders healed. He ate his meals while they were warm. He began watching the sunset again. The drought continued, but the feared morning never came. The spring grew shallow and then deepened after rain. Some days demanded care. None demanded 6 evenings of care in advance. "Planning is not the enemy of rest," Suri said. "We prepare what can reasonably be prepared. Then we put down the jars." Anika pictured the invisible jars she had carried into the temple, conversations she might need to have, mistakes she might make, illnesses that might come, choices she had not yet been asked to make. Each concern had seemed weightless by itself. Together, they had bent her beneath a burden no one else could see. Suri reached toward the lake, her empty palm turned upward. "Imagine placing 1 jar here," Anika breathed out. "And another." She breathed out again. The night did not promise that the spring would always be full. It offered something quieter. There would be time to meet the morning when morning arrived. For now, there was water beside the steps. There was air moving easily into the body. There was a lantern glowing on the landing. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Let tomorrow remain unopened. The unopened day cannot yet be carried, and you do not have to lift it in your sleep. The walkway ended near a small well. A wooden bucket hung above it, and several clay jars stood against the wall. Suri filled 1 cup for Anika and 1 for herself. "A young monk once had the duty of bringing water to the kitchen each morning," she said. "He carried 2 jars from this well. It took less than half an hour." The monk wanted to become exceptionally dependable. One evening he thought, "Tomorrow I will need water, so I should carry it tonight." He filled the kitchen jars before bed. Then he remembered that the following day would also have a morning. He filled more jars for that. Soon, he was carrying water for days that had not arrived. When every jar was full, He borrowed containers from the storeroom. By midnight his arms ached. Water covered the kitchen floor. There was nowhere left to walk. The cook found him trying to balance a final bucket upon a shelf. "Whose water is that?" she asked. "Tomorrow's." "And the water beside it?" "The day after tomorrow's." The cook opened the kitchen door and pointed to the well beneath the moon. "Has tomorrow moved the well?" The monk admitted that it had not. Together they returned the unnecessary water to the garden. In the morning, the monk carried 2 jars as usual. The wish to be dependable became distrust, Suri said. He no longer trusted the well, the morning, or the person he would be when morning came. Anika drank from her cup. She understood this kind of labor. At night she tried to perform tomorrow's thinking with today's tired mind. She solved possible problems for a version of herself who would have daylight, new information, and perhaps help. What if tomorrow's version of me cannot manage? "Has she asked you to flood the kitchen?" Anika laughed quietly. Suri returned the cup to the shelf. "Leave her the well. Leave her 2 empty jars. Trust her with the morning. For now, you may put down tomorrow's water. The well will remain where it is. The morning will bring its own hands. You are allowed to meet it after rest." Below the path, a ferryman was securing his boat for the night. He drew the rope through a ring in the stone and tested the knot once. Suri waited until he had gone, then told Anika about another ferryman who worked there many years earlier. One evening, thick fog covered the lake while he was carrying a single passenger home. The ferryman could no longer see either shore. Afraid of drifting off course, he corrected the boat toward the left. A moment later, uncertain whether he had corrected too far, he turned right, then left again. He rowed harder each time anxiety changed its mind. Hours passed. The passenger eventually asked him to stop. "If I stop, the current may carry us away. And if you continue like this?" The ferryman listened. Through the fog came the faint sound of water striking a familiar hollow rock. They were close to the same place they had started. All his correction had become a circle. He lifted the oars from the water. For several minutes the boat drifted. Without the splash of frantic rowing, he heard a temple bell from the eastern shore. He turned toward the sound and made one steady course. They reached land before midnight. "Effort can feel like direction," Suri said, "even when it is only reaction." At night, the mind rose left and right through the same uncertainty. Perhaps I should do this. No, perhaps the opposite. Perhaps that person meant one thing. No, perhaps something worse. Each possibility causes another correction. Because the mind is working hard, it assumes it must be traveling somewhere. Lift the oars for a moment. You may feel the current. You may notice that uncertainty remains. But without constant correction, quieter information can become audible. The body may tell you it is tired. The darkness may tell you the decision belongs to daylight. The simple fact that no action is possible from bed may itself be the bell on the eastern shore. Anika imagined the oars resting across her lap. The boat turned slowly beneath the moon. It did not capsize. It did not race into danger. It simply stopped obeying every anxious change of direction. Some questions will still require rowing. When morning reveals the shore, you can choose a course and use your strength well. Tonight, let the fog prevent unnecessary distance. Let the boat drift within the safe width of this breath. Listen beneath the splashing of thought. There may be a bell you could not hear while trying to control the whole lake. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The oars may rest. Across the courtyard stood a narrow writing room. Its paper windows shone amber in the lantern light, and shelves covered one wall from floor to ceiling. On them, rested folded letters tied with faded thread. Suri led Anika inside and lit one small lamp. "Are these messages for the monastery?" Anika asked. "Some were sent here. Most were written here and never sent." Years ago, Suri explained, a young woman named Lale came to the temple after an argument with her sister. The argument had begun with a careless remark and grown through months of remembered injuries. By the time Lale arrived, she was conducting the conversation every night without her sister being present. She composed perfect replies while washing dishes. She defended herself while walking to market. In bed, she imagined accusations and answered each one until dawn. Lala asked the temple keeper what she should say to finally win. The keeper gave her paper and ink. "Write everything," she said. Lala wrote for hours. She filled page after page with what had happened, what should have happened, and what her sister ought to understand. When she finished, the keeper read none of it. He placed the pages in an envelope and asked, "Must this be answered tonight?" "My sister has not even seen it." "That was not my question." Lala looked at the envelope. She realized she had been answering a letter that had never been written. The keeper placed it on a shelf. "You may send it in the morning." Morning came, but Lala wanted to revise it first. She removed several cruel lines and added 2 honest ones. Then she decided to wait another day. On the second morning, she shortened the letter again. On the third, only 4 sentences remained. "I was hurt. I think you were hurt as well. I do not want us to keep injuring each other from a distance. When we are ready, I would like to listen." That was the letter she sent. Her sister did not reply immediately. Yet Lala slept that night because she had stopped demanding that an imagined conversation reach its conclusion before dawn. Suri moved her fingers along the old threads binding the letters. "A thought can knock on the mind like a messenger," she said. "You may receive it without composing an answer. Perhaps you remember something awkward you said years ago. Perhaps you imagine explaining yourself to someone who misunderstood you. Perhaps the mind places another person in the room and begins rehearsing both sides of a conversation. Notice the letter. You need not tear it up. You need not send it. Fold it gently and place it on the shelf. If it deserves an answer, daylight will help you write one. And if daylight reveals that no answer is needed, the paper may remain where it is. The shelves in the little room held no resentment. They held only words that had been given somewhere to rest." Anika imagined taking every unfinished conversation from her mind and setting it there. A reply to an old friend, an explanation to her family, the argument she feared having next week, the apology she wished someone else would offer. One by one, the letters became quiet objects rather than living demands. Outside, the lake continued reflecting the moon without asking the moon to explain itself. Suri lowered the lamp. "The night is not a courtroom," she whispered. "No verdict is required." "Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Let the letter wait without becoming an emergency. Let tomorrow remain unopened." They entered a small library behind the pavilion. Shelves held old books wrapped in cloth, but the center table was covered with blank paper. "Travelers sometimes write what they cannot stop saying in their minds," Suri explained. Anika sat and took up a brush. At first she did not know what to write. Then the words came quickly. She wrote to the person who had not yet answered her message. She explained what she had meant, defended what she had not meant, and answered criticisms that had never been made. When the page was full, Suri asked, "Where shall we send it?" Anika read the letter again. "Nowhere." "Then its journey is already complete." Suri told her about a teacher who received an angry letter from a former student. The teacher read it once and placed it upon his desk. All afternoon he composed replies. In one he was patient. In another, he proved the student wrong. In a third, he wrote nothing except a single devastating sentence. That evening, he read the original letter again and noticed a line he had missed. The student's father had died. Grief stood behind much of the anger. The teacher wrote a brief reply, offering condolences and asking whether the student wanted company. He burned the other replies, though none had ever touched paper. Not every imagined conversation deserves delivery, Suri said. Some words exist only to reveal what hurts. Anika folded her page. What do I do with this? You may keep it, burn it, or leave it here. The important thing is not to continue writing it after you lie down. Anika placed the letter in a wooden box beneath the table. It did not resolve the real relationship. It did not guarantee a kind reply. But the words had somewhere to rest other than the inside of her mind. If an unfinished conversation is keeping you awake, imagine placing it upon paper. No need to make it fair or elegant. Let the unspoken answer exist there. Then fold the page. The real conversation, if one is needed, belongs to another hour. Tonight, the letter needs no reply. They left the writing room and followed a path behind the temple. There, beneath flowering branches, stood a small guest house with a window open on every side. Thin curtains moved inward and outward with the breeze. The room seemed to breathe. Suri told Anika that the guest house once belonged to a merchant named Ishan. He had built it as a retreat, but he could not rest there. At night, he closed every window against insects, rain, thieves, noise, dust, and anything else the world might send inside. Then he checked each latch. After checking them, he wondered whether he had truly checked them. So he walked around the room again. The house became warm and airless. Every small sound seemed suspicious. The tighter he sealed the room, the less safe he felt. One humid night, a traveling nun asked permission to sleep on his veranda. Ishan agreed, but warned her that the valley was full of disturbances. The nun lay down beside the open garden and was soon asleep. Ishan checked his windows 3 more times. Eventually he stepped outside and woke her. How can you sleep with nothing between you and the night? The nun opened one eye. The night is not trying to enter. We are already in it. She rolled over and returned to sleep. Ishan remained on the veranda. At first, every sound kept its threatening name. A branch scraped the roof. An owl called. Rain began to touch the leaves. But as he listened without locking anything, the noises changed. The branch was only a branch. The owl was not a warning meant for him. The rain arrived without requiring a decision. He opened one window before dawn. The next evening, he opened 2. Within a week, fresh air moved freely through the house. Not every insect stayed outside. A little rain once dampened the floor. Yet Ishan slept, because the room no longer had to be defended from the entire world. An open mind does not mean believing every thought, Suri said. It means allowing thoughts to pass through without turning each one into an intruder. She and Anika sat on the guest house floor. A curtain lifted beside them. Cool air crossed Anika's forehead and moved out through the opposite window. Suri asked her to imagine the mind as this room. One window opened toward memory, another toward imagination, another toward the body and its changing sensations, another toward sounds in the present night. A thought entered. I should have done more today. It moved through the room. Another entered. What if tomorrow is difficult? The curtain lifted, then fell. Another came carrying no words at all, only a familiar tightness. It, too, was allowed air and space. You do not need to follow a thought out through the opposite window. You do not need to push it back the way it came. Let it cross at its own pace. Some thoughts linger like warm air. Some circle the room twice. Their presence does not mean the windows have failed. The practice is simply to stop rebuilding the walls around every visitor. Anika lay back on the woven mat. Above her, moonlight drew a pale shape across the ceiling. The shape altered whenever a curtain passed before it. Nothing in the room held perfectly still, yet the room itself felt peaceful. That was something she had not understood before. Peace did not require the absence of movement. It could be the space in which movement occurred. The curtain rose. The curtain settled. Breath entered. Breath departed. The mind opened one window, then another. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The night is already here, and you are allowed to rest within it. The library opened into a long hall with windows on both sides. None contained glass. The night air moved freely through them, entering from the lake and leaving toward the mountain garden. Small curtains lifted and settled. The lantern flames leaned briefly, then stood upright again. During winter, do you close these? Anika asked. We hang screens, Suri said, but we never try to keep all weather outside. She told Anika about a wealthy woman who built a house to protect herself from every uncomfortable season. She sealed the windows against cold, dust, noise, and rain. At first the house felt safe. Soon the air became stale. Cooking smoke gathered near the ceiling. The scent of damp cloth remained for days. The woman sealed the door more tightly because the house now smelled unpleasant, which made the air worse. A carpenter visiting from another village opened one small window. Cold air entered. So did the scent of pine and distant rain. The window allows both, the carpenter said. That is why the room can breathe. The woman learned to close the shutters during storms and open them again afterward. Safety did not require permanent sealing. A mind can become such a house, Suri said. We try to prevent unwanted thoughts, so we close every opening. Then we become trapped with the thoughts already inside. They stood between the open windows. A cool breeze entered from Anika's left. It crossed her face and departed through the opposite side of the hall. You did not have to push it out, Suri said. Another breeze followed. Anika imagined thoughts moving the same way. A memory entered. It touched the room. It found an open window and continued. Planning entered. Remembering entered. A small fear entered wearing the shape of tomorrow. None needed to be imprisoned. None needed to be chased with a broom. The room could remain open. You may allow your mind the same quiet ventilation now. There is space for a thought to enter. There is also space beyond it. There is no need to close around what appears. Let it cross the room. Let the curtain lift. Let the lantern lean and become steady again. The night air knows the way out. Beyond the guest house, the path narrowed between smooth, dark stones. Anika walked only a short distance before something sharp pressed beneath her heel. She stopped and removed her sandal. Inside was a grain of gravel no larger than a lentil. Suri smiled as Anika tipped it into her palm. Such a small thing, Anika said. Small enough to carry for miles, Suri replied, and large enough to make every mile painful. She told Anika of a courier who crossed the valley each week. One morning, a pebble entered his sandal. He noticed it immediately, but the next village was not far away, so he continued. At the village, he was offered tea, and he forgot the pebble while sitting. When he stood, the pain returned. Yet now he was late for the ferry, so he continued again. By noon, he was limping. He cursed the road builders, the sandal maker, and the heat. He imagined that age had finally begun weakening his joints. He adjusted the strap, changed his stride, and walked along the soft edge of the road. Only when he reached the river did a child ask why he did not remove his shoe. The courier laughed at the simplicity of the question. He had spent the entire day changing his journey around something he could have put down that morning. Suri closed Anika's fingers around the grain of gravel. Some nighttime thoughts are like this. They hurt, so we assume they must be important. But pain and importance are not always the same. Perhaps it is one unfinished task, one expression on another person's face, one sentence that sounded strange when you replayed it later, one minor decision that the tired mind has begun polishing into a crisis. The mind changes its stride around the thought. It tries another sleeping position. It constructs explanations. It blames the road, the weather, or itself. But sometimes the kindest response is not a better explanation. Sometimes it is simply to notice, there is the stone. Name it without enlarging it. There is embarrassment. There is uncertainty. There is one task waiting for daylight. There is a body that has been carrying this long enough. Then imagine loosening the sandal and letting the stone fall. You do not have to throw it into the darkness. You do not have to prove that it never mattered. Place it beside the path. If it deserves attention tomorrow, you will still know where it is. Anika opened her hand. The tiny stone caught a point of moonlight before dropping among thousands of others. Immediately, it was impossible to distinguish. The path had not changed. Her foot had. They continued more slowly. Anika began noticing how often the mind declared a thought too urgent to set down even briefly. It feared that rest meant negligence. Yet the courier had not delivered his messages better by remaining in pain. Rest could make the next step more honest. At the curve of the path, Suri stopped beside a shallow basin filled by rainwater. She invited Anika to wash the dust from her foot. The water was cool, and the relief traveled upward through her calf. The body often knows release before the mind agrees, Suri said. So feel the weight of your own feet now, or the weight of your legs against the bed. Nothing is asking them to walk farther tonight. Feel the hands resting where they have come to rest. Nothing must be held more tightly. Let the tongue soften behind the teeth. Let the space between the eyebrows widen. Let the shoulders discover that the burden has already been placed on the ground. One little stone at a time. One small tightening released. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The road will remain until morning. Your feet may be still. Outside the hall, the garden path had been raked into long, curved lines. Anika had taken only several steps when she felt something beneath her foot. She nearly ignored it. Then she remembered the blister, removed her shoe, and tipped out a grain of pale gravel. A small stone, she said. Small enough to dismiss, Suri replied, and large enough to change a journey. She told Anika of a pilgrim who discovered a pebble in his sandal during the first mile of a long walk. He decided it was too insignificant to stop for. With every step, the pebble pressed the same place. By midday, he was angry at the road. By evening, he blamed the people who had built it. When another traveler asked why he was limping, the pilgrim delivered a long speech about endurance. The traveler listened and then said, "Take off your sandal." The pilgrim removed the pebble. The great enemy of the road sat silently in his palm. He had believed that pausing would delay the journey. Refusing to pause had made every mile slower. Some problems require action, even at night, Suri said. A twisted blanket can be straightened. A room that is too warm may be cooled. A thought you fear forgetting can be written in one line. Gentleness is practical. Anika placed the grain of gravel beside the path. If there is a small stone beneath your comfort now, you are allowed to adjust. Move the pillow, release the clenched hand, take one sip of water if it is needed, write one brief reminder and return. Do not build a philosophy of endurance around a pebble, and if nothing practical is required, let the path carry you onward without searching for stones. Beside the rain basin stood a room Anika had not noticed before. Through its open door, she saw a loom and a length of deep blue cloth stretched across it. One silver thread ran through the fabric like moonlight on water. Suri explained that the temple's blankets were once woven by a woman named Nima. Her work was admired throughout the valley because every line was even and every edge exact. Nima took pride in never leaving a loose thread. As she grew older, her hands began to tremble. She could still weave, but each blanket took longer because she repeatedly undid sections that no one else would have noticed. One winter, the monastery needed 20 blankets before the first snow. Nima completed only one. She sat at the loom late each night correcting tiny irregularities while travelers slept beneath thin coverings in the guest house. A young assistant named Aya asked why the blanket had to be flawless. "Because an error remains wherever I leave it." Aya ran her hand across the cloth. "So does warmth." Nima dismissed the answer, but that night heavy snow arrived. A family reached the monastery cold and wet. The only finished blanket went to their youngest child. Nima looked at the unfinished cloth still attached to the loom. A silver thread hung loose near one corner. For the first time in her life, she cut the fabric without repairing it. The family wrapped themselves inside. No one woke during the night to complain about the thread. In the morning, Nima found that the child had tied a tiny wooden bead to its end. What she had called an imperfection had become the child's favorite part of the blanket. After that, Nima left one deliberate loose thread in every piece she made. It reminded her that usefulness could arrive before perfection and that human hands were allowed to remain visible in human work. Suri showed Anika the edge of the blue cloth. A short silver thread waited there, unsecured. "The tired mind becomes an exacting weaver," she said. "Before rest, it inspects the day for loose ends." An email not answered, a room not tidied, a plan without its final detail, a feeling that did not resolve into a clear lesson. The mind believes sleep should wait until every thread is tied, but life is woven on a loom that remains in use. There will always be another line, another color, another edge not yet finished. Choose one loose thread and let it remain. Not forever, only without correction tonight. Imagine running your hand across the day as Aya touched the blanket. Beneath the imperfections, does it still carry warmth? Perhaps you fed yourself. Perhaps you answered one person kindly. Perhaps you endured something difficult without recognizing the effort it required. Perhaps you simply reached this bed. Warmth can be present in an unfinished day. Rest can be useful before it is perfect. Anika thought of a task she had left incomplete before beginning her journey. Each night she had mentally returned to the loom and woven a few imaginary rows, only to undo them again. Now she pictured cutting the cloth where it was. The unfinished edge did not unravel the whole fabric. Morning could return it to the loom. Suri lowered the cover over the weaving room. The loose silver thread disappeared in shadow, neither repaired nor lost. "Leave one thread for morning," she whispered. "The day has already carried enough warmth. Nothing needs to be solved tonight." The path descended toward a narrow channel where the lake flowed between two banks. A wooden bridge crossed the water, but mist had gathered so thickly that only the first few steps were visible. Anika paused. "Does the bridge continue?" she asked. "It did the last time I crossed," Suri said. "You cannot see the other side." "No, but I can see the next plank." They stepped onto the bridge. Moisture beaded on the railing. The lantern behind them became a blurred amber circle, while the lantern ahead had not yet appeared. Anika could hear water beneath the boards without seeing its direction. Suri told her about a carpenter named Ren who had helped build this bridge. When the work began, Ren wanted a clear view of the finished crossing before laying the first plank. He worried about every measurement that might later prove wrong. He drew plans, corrected them, and drew them again. Meanwhile, the other carpenter measured the distance to the first support and began cutting wood. "How can you work when we have not resolved the far end?" Ren asked. "The far end cannot hold this plank," the carpenter replied. "Only this support can." Ren reluctantly helped place it. Then they measured from that plank to the next support. Errors appeared, but close enough to be corrected. The bridge revealed its final shape through the building of it. Years later, Ren crossed during a night of heavy mist. He remembered his old demand to see the entire structure before beginning and laughed. Even after the bridge was finished, life sometimes allowed him only one plank at a time. "Uncertainty feels like the absence of a path," Suri said. "Often it is only the absence of a distant view." Anika looked down. Her foot rested on solid wood. The following plank waited just beyond it. Perhaps tomorrow contains a decision you cannot yet see clearly. Perhaps you are waiting for certainty about work, love, health, money, family, or the direction of your life. The mind walks to the edge of visibility and demands that the mist move. But mist is not a command, it is weather. You may let it be present. The next true step will appear when you are near enough to take it. Until then, imagining 20 invisible planks does not carry you across. Suri and Anika continued. One plank, then another. The bridge remained quiet beneath them. Halfway across, a pale glow formed in the mist. It became a lantern hanging from the opposite railing. They had been approaching it before they could see it. This too happens in life. Help may already be nearer than the mind believes. Understanding may be forming beyond the present field of view. Conditions can change while you sleep without your supervision. They reached the other bank. Anika turned, but the bridge vanished behind them again. Crossing it had not removed the mist. It had shown that clarity was not required all at once. Suri placed the lamp beneath a stone shelter. "At bedtime, people often try to cross all of tomorrow in imagination," she said. "No wonder they are exhausted before morning. So, let tonight end on this bank. You do not need to rehearse the whole crossing. You do not need to know what the final plank will feel like beneath your foot. There will be ground for the step that is actually yours. For now, the body is supported by the bed. This is the only plank beneath you. Breathing in, feel that support. Breathing out, allow the mist to remain mist. Let tomorrow remain unopened. Nothing needs to be solved tonight." Mist had thickened near the bridge. From the garden, Anika could see its first lantern and only the faintest glow of the second. The arch and far steps had disappeared. "We should wait until it clears," she said. "Why?" "We cannot see the other side." Suri lifted her lantern. "Can you see the next stone?" Anika could. They stepped onto the bridge. Suri told her about a courier who refused to begin any journey until he could describe every part of the road. He studied maps, questioned travelers, and delayed his departure whenever two accounts disagreed. One morning, an old mapmaker asked him to walk to a village beyond the hill. "The road disappears behind the hill," the courier objected. Most roads do, said the mapmaker. The courier finally began. At each turn, enough path appeared for the next several steps. When he reached the village, he understood that the hidden road had existed even while he could not see it. On the moonlit bridge, mist moved around Anika's shoulders. One lantern appeared, then another. The stones beneath her feet were damp but steady. Overthinking asks the bridge to reveal the far shore before we step onto it, Suri said. Life usually offers one pool of lantern light. Tomorrow may contain a bridge you cannot yet see across. You do not need the entire span tonight. The next appointment will reveal the next decision. The next conversation will provide information unavailable now. The next morning will illuminate stones that darkness keeps hidden. Let the far shore remain inside the mist. This breath is the visible stone. This moment is the lantern you have. They reached the center of the bridge. The mist opened briefly, revealing the pavilion, the lake, and mirror upon the steps. Then it closed again without taking those things away. On the far side of the bridge stood an older building than the house of open windows. This one had many small rooms arranged around a courtyard. A wooden tablet above the entrance bore the words, "Guests arrive. Guests depart." Pilgrims once slept here, Suri said. Now we use it to teach a different kind of hospitality. She told Anika about an innkeeper named Pema, who tried to control every traveler who entered his guest house. If a cheerful guest arrived, Pema begged him to stay indefinitely. If an irritable guest appeared, Pema argued until the traveler became even more irritable. If someone looked mysterious, Pema followed her from room to room, trying to discover what she intended. He slept badly because he believed every visitor changed the meaning of his house. One winter night, a large caravan arrived during a storm. Some travelers complained about the beds. Some praised the soup. A baby cried. 2 merchants laughed too loudly. An elderly man said nothing at all. Pema rushed between the rooms, trying to manage every mood. His grandmother, who had founded the inn, watched from beside the stove. "You are treating weather as ownership," she told him. Pema did not understand. She pointed to the courtyard. Snow was falling through the open center and melting on the warm stones. "Does the guest house become snow because snow enters it?" "No." "Does it become laughter because someone laughs?" "No." "Then why do you become every mood that crosses your doorway?" The grandmother gave Pema one simple duty for the remainder of the night. Offer each guest a room, but do not climb into the bed with them. When irritation arrived, he said silently, "A room for irritation." When worry arrived, a room for worry. When joy arrived, a room for joy. The travelers continued behaving as travelers do. Yet Pema discovered that hospitality did not require captivity. By morning, most had packed their belongings and gone. Those who remained would leave after breakfast. Suri opened one of the small doors. The room beyond contained a simple mat and an empty shelf. "A thought is a guest," she said. "Awareness is the guest house." A worried thought may enter wearing wet clothes and speaking urgently. Give it a room. You do not need to surrender the entire building. A memory may arrive with old luggage. Let it place the bags down. You are not required to unpack them tonight. A pleasant fantasy may ask to stay forever. You can enjoy its company without locking the door behind it. Anika sat in the courtyard. Mist drifted above the roofline, briefly revealing a field of stars. She listened for the guests within herself. One said, "You are behind. A room for being behind." Another said, "You may disappoint someone. A room for fear of disappointing." Another brought the face of someone she missed. A room for longing. None of these rooms was the whole guest house. Behind every door remained the quiet space in which the guest was being noticed. Suri explained that some guests return often. Their return does not mean you welcome them incorrectly. Familiar thoughts know the road. Let them arrive without turning familiarity into authority. You may say, "I know this traveler. It has visited before." Then offer it the same modest room. Do not give it the keys to every door. Do not ask it to manage the inn. The night grew deeper. One by one, the imagined rooms darkened. Anika did not need to evict anyone before sleeping. That had always been the impossible task, waiting for the mind to become vacant. The innkeeper can sleep while guests remain. The guest house does not disappear when its lamps are lowered. Thoughts may murmur somewhere down the hall. The body can still rest. If another guest knocks, let the door open gently. There is space. There has always been more space than visitors. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Let tomorrow remain unopened. The guests will leave when their roads call them onward. At the far end of the bridge stood a modest building once used by pilgrims. Its entrance opened into a room with several sleeping mats and empty hooks along the wall. Before the newer rooms were built, everyone slept here, Suri said. Merchants, monks, musicians, farmers, joyful travelers, and difficult ones. She told Anika about a guest housekeeper who wanted only peaceful visitors. When an impatient merchant arrived, the keeper became angry. When a grieving family stayed, he resented their sadness. When laughing students came, he disliked their noise. The keeper spent each day judging the guests and each night worrying about who might arrive next. His daughter eventually took over the guest house. She welcomed visitors, gave them what was reasonable, and remembered that each would leave. She did not offer the storeroom to a thief or allow a violent guest to harm others. Hospitality did not mean surrendering the house. It meant understanding that an arrival was not permanent. Thoughts are visitors, Suri said. Some are pleasant, some complain. Some repeat the same story because they have forgotten telling it. You may acknowledge them without giving each one the keys. Anika imagined her mind as the quiet room. A planning thought arrived, carrying many bags. You may rest briefly, she told it, but you cannot unpack tonight. A memory entered and sat near the wall. A worry knocked loudly. I hear you, Anika said. The house is safe enough for this hour. No thought vanished immediately, yet each seemed less like an owner and more like a traveler waiting for morning. You may let your own guest house remain open without becoming crowded. There is a hook for the unfinished task, a mat for the old conversation, a cup of tea for the worry that believes it must guard the door. But no visitor needs to become permanent. Morning changes the guests. Sleep allows many to leave unnoticed. You do not have to remain awake to watch them go. In the center of the courtyard, rainwater had collected in several drinking cups left beneath the eaves. One cup was smooth and round. Another had a crack running from its rim almost to its base. The moon appeared in both. Suri lifted the damaged cup carefully. A thin line of water escaped between her fingers, yet the bright reflection remained on the surface. A potter once made this cup for the abbot, she said. Before it reached him, it fell from the cart. The young apprentice who had shaped it was devastated. He had spent weeks choosing clay, turning the wheel, painting the glaze, and tending the kiln. When he saw the crack, he believed all that effort had become worthless. He carried the cup to the river, intending to throw it away. The abbot met him on the path and asked for a drink. Embarrassed, the apprentice filled the cracked cup. Water began leaking before he could offer it. "Forgive me," he said. "This vessel is ruined." The abbot drank what remained. "It carried enough," he said. That night he placed the cup outside his window. Rain filled it, and the moon rested inside. He called the apprentice to look. "Where has the crack damaged the moon?" The apprentice stared into the water. The reflected moon trembled whenever another drop fell, but it was whole. The abbot kept the cup. Each morning it carried water to a flowering plant beside his door. It leaked along the path, and moss grew in the damp line it left behind. Years later, visitors admired that ribbon of green without knowing it had been watered by what the apprentice called a failure. Suri returned the cup beneath the eaves. "We confuse the condition of the vessel with the condition of the light," she said. "You may carry cracks made by regret, disappointment, illness, loss, or years that did not unfold as expected. The mind examines them at night and concludes that peace can no longer be reflected here. Yet the moon does not ask whether the cup is flawless. Awareness does not require a perfect history. Rest does not belong only to people who made every right decision." Anika looked at the two cups. The smooth reflection and the broken reflection were made from the same light. A breeze crossed the courtyard. Both moons shivered. Both became still again. "But what if the cup cannot hold enough?" Anika asked. "Enough for what?" She had no answer. Enough to prove something. Enough to compensate for every mistake. Enough to preserve every person and every possibility. The demand had no natural end. Suri touched the wet moss between the stones. "What leaves you may still nourish the road. Perhaps an old plan broke. Perhaps a relationship changed shape. Perhaps the person you expected to become never arrived. This does not mean the life that remains cannot carry moonlight. For this moment, the vessel needs to hold only one breath. Breathing in, the cup fills. Breathing out, it empties by itself. There is no failure in emptying. The next breath does not accuse the last one of leaving. Feel how the body understands this exchange. It receives, it releases, it receives again. No breath is kept as evidence of worth." Anika watched another drop slip through the crack. The moon remained. Nothing needs to be repaired tonight. Nothing needs to be proved tonight. The light has already found you. At the end of the courtyard stood a doorway without a door. Its frame was made from cedar polished smooth by years of passing hands. Suri said it had been built by a carpenter named Malin, who promised the monastery a carved door before winter. Malin chose excellent wood and drew an intricate design of mountains, clouds, birds, and lotus flowers. Each time he prepared to cut, he noticed another improvement he could make. Weeks passed in planning. When winter arrived, the frame was still empty. Cold wind crossed the room behind it. The monks hung a plain woven curtain there and continued their work. Malin felt ashamed whenever he saw the curtain. He stopped visiting the monastery because the unfinished doorway seemed to accuse him. Years later, he returned and found children running through the opening. The curtain had been removed. Sunlight entered freely, and the empty frame offered a view of the moonlit garden. The abbot welcomed him without mentioning the promised door. Malin finally confessed. "Every time I imagined returning, I thought you would ask why I had failed." The abbot looked through the frame. "We needed a way through. You gave us one. But I never made the door. Then nothing has been blocking it." Malin laughed and wept at the same time. The work was incomplete, yet the opening had not spent those years being useless. He eventually carved a simple door with no mountains, birds, or flowers. It could be closed during storms and open toward the garden on clear nights. He finished it in 3 days. Shame often stands in an unfinished doorway and pretends to be a locked door, Suri said. You remember something delayed, abandoned, or left less beautiful than intended. The mind says you cannot move forward until the old work is completed exactly as first imagined. But perhaps there is already a way through. Perhaps the apology can be simpler. Perhaps the task can become smaller. Perhaps the plan that failed has left an opening through which a different life is visible. Anika touched the cedar frame. She thought of an ambition she had quietly abandoned. She had interpreted every new direction as evidence that she had failed the old one. Now she pictured the abandoned plan not as a sealed wall, but as an empty doorway. Moonlight had been passing through it for years. You do not need to rebuild every unfinished past tonight. Let one doorway remain open. Feel the air moving through it. Notice what the absence of the expected door has allowed you to see. Morning may bring a simple piece of work, or the doorway may remain open a while longer. Neither possibility requires midnight judgment. The carpenter is allowed to sleep before choosing the design. The room already has a way through. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. They returned toward the lake by a path lined with small stone figures. Each had been carved by a different hand. Some faces were serene, some were uneven and almost comical. Moss softened the oldest ones. Suri stopped before a figure whose hands were held open. This marks the place where two travelers once met, she said. One was an elderly pilgrim walking east. The other was a younger version of himself walking west. Anika looked at her, unsure whether she had heard correctly. It is a story, Suri said. Stories are allowed to arrange time differently. The old pilgrim recognized the young man at once, proud, hurried, and certain that enough discipline could prevent every sorrow. The young traveler did not recognize him. You are taking the wrong road, the old man said. How would you know? Because I took it. The old pilgrim warned him of mistakes ahead, people he would neglect, opportunities he would misunderstand, words he would wish to retrieve. But the younger man grew angry. If you know so much, tell me the perfect road. The old man pointed east, then west, then lowered his hand. Every road he remembered contained some mixture of kindness and error. Had the younger man avoided all his mistakes, he would also have missed friendships, lessons, and acts of courage that grew beside them. At last the old pilgrim said, I did not come to correct you. I came to stop punishing you. The young man laughed because he did not yet understand. They shared tea beside the road. When the cup was empty, each continued in his own direction. The old pilgrim felt lighter. The past had not changed, but he no longer demanded that an inexperienced traveler possess the wisdom of an old one. Suri brushed a fallen leaf from the stone figure's open palms. At night, we often summon yesterday's self for trial, she said. We present evidence that was unavailable then and condemn the traveler for not knowing it. Think gently of the person you were in one difficult moment. That person knew less than you know now. That person may have been frightened, lonely, exhausted, hopeful, or trying to protect something precious with imperfect skill. Forgiveness does not require calling every choice wise. It means ending the impossible demand that the past choose again. You can say, I wish you had done differently, and also, you may stop standing in this courtroom. Anika remembered herself during a conversation she had replayed for months. In memory, she had always spoken with the understanding she gained afterward. She had forgotten the confusion that existed in the actual room. For the first time, she pictured that earlier self not as an offender, but as a tired traveler standing at a crossroads in bad weather. She did not need to approve of the chosen road. She could offer the traveler shelter. Suri invited her to imagine setting a cup of warm tea beside yesterday's self. No lecture, no interrogation, only a place to sit. Perhaps the traveler apologizes. Perhaps she remains silent. Perhaps she is too tired even to meet your eyes. Let her rest anyway. The wisdom gained from pain can travel forward without pain being carried as punishment. Keep the lesson. Put down the sentence. The stone figures watched without judgment. Their carved faces had endured rain, heat, and countless seasons. Moss had not made them less sacred. Anika placed both palms upward, like the figure before her. Yesterday could not be held there. Tomorrow could not be held there. Only cool night air touched her skin. The temple now began its deepest silence. It was not an empty silence. It contained the soft life of the garden, the small language of water, and the faint movement of air beneath the eaves. Suri invited Anika to listen without searching. First came the nearest sound, the blanket moving with breath. It did not need a name, but the mind gave it one, and then let the name fade. Beyond it came the reeds touching near the platform. Beyond the reeds came the lake folding quietly against stone. Beyond the lake, somewhere too distant to locate, a night bird called once. Each sound appeared from silence and returned without being pushed. Thoughts can be heard in the same way. A thought appears close. I am still awake. Let it be the blanket moving. Another appears farther away. Tomorrow may be difficult. Let it be the reeds. A memory sounds from across the water. Let it be the night bird calling once. No sound needs to be followed to its source. No thought needs to be followed to its conclusion. The lake receives them all without becoming crowded. Anika noticed that she had been measuring the distance to sleep. Each time she checked, she brought herself back to the starting point. Suri told her about a child who traveled with his father through the mountains. Every few minutes, the child asked how much farther remained. The father answered with distances, then landmarks, then guesses. None satisfied the child because the answer changed nothing about the road beneath them. Finally, the father said, "We will arrive after the step that arrives there." The child stopped asking. He began noticing blue flowers along the path, clouds resting against the peaks, and the changing sound of their footsteps over soil and stone. Hours later, he looked up and found they had reached the village. Sleep is like that village. You cannot reach it by repeatedly asking how far away it is. You arrive after the breath that arrives there. You do not know which breath it will be, and you do not need to know. This breath may be only a blue flower beside the path. The next may be the shadow of a cloud. Another may pass unnoticed. Let each breath be where it is, rather than a vehicle forced towards sleep. Breathing in, this step. Breathing out, this step. No distance to calculate. No arrival to announce. The body may know the village before the mind does. Suri's voice seemed farther away now, not because she had moved, but because Anika no longer needed to hold every word. Some words reached her clearly. Others dissolved at their edges. This was not failure to listen. It was listening becoming rest. You may let these words dissolve as well. There is no examination in the morning. No one will ask you to recite the stories. If you miss a sentence, let it pass downstream. If you return after several minutes of wandering thought, you have not lost the path. You are on the next plank now. Nothing behind you must be recovered. The narration may become one more current in the night, present, gentle, and not requiring pursuit. Across the lake, a lantern wick lowered naturally as its oil diminished. The reflection shortened on the water. No attendant hurried toward it. The lantern had given the light required of it. Darkness gathered around the remaining glow without swallowing anything valuable. Imagine one lantern within the mind lowering in the same way. The lantern of planning becomes smaller. The lantern of remembering becomes smaller. The lantern of watching the body becomes smaller. The lantern that asks whether sleep has arrived becomes smaller too. None needs to be extinguished by force. Let the oil settle beneath the wick. Let the flame become warm and low. Moonlight is enough for the lake. Darkness is enough for the room. The quiet intelligence of the body is enough for this breath. Anika's hands had become so still that she could no longer tell where effort ended and the blanket began. The boundary was unimportant. The temple platform held her. The earth held the platform. Nothing beneath either was asking her to remain vigilant. For a few moments, Suri said nothing at all. Silence continued the teaching without words. When her voice returned, it was barely more than the movement of reeds. You have done enough for this day. Even if the day remains imperfect, you have reached its resting place. Even if one question remains, you have reached its resting place. Even if sleep comes slowly, you are already resting while it approaches. There is no wasted minute here. Lying quietly is not a failed version of sleep. It is shelter. It is reduced effort. It is the body receiving darkness one moment at a time. So there is nothing to achieve from this point onward. Let the next breath be ordinary. Let the next sound come and go. Let the next thought take a modest room. Let the next moment remain unnamed. The village will arrive after the step that arrives there. The morning will open its own box. The lotus will choose its own hour. The moon will leave the cup without breaking it. And the person listening now may gradually become less interested in listening. That is allowed. That is the way. Let yesterday's traveler sleep. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The night had deepened. The lantern seemed warmer now, and the spaces between them softer. Anika and Suri sat near Mira on the broad temple steps. Mira did not turn. Her long blonde hair moved at the edges when the breeze arrived, then settled against the blue fabric of her robe. For some time, nobody spoke. At last Anika said, "There is something I keep remembering." She told Suri of a choice made several years earlier. At the time, Anika had been frightened and hurried. She had avoided a difficult conversation, and someone she loved had been hurt by the silence. They had eventually forgiven one another, but Anika continued returning to the scene. In every return, she gave her younger self the understanding she possessed now, and demanded to know why it had not been used then. Suri listened. "A traveler leaves a village carrying the map available there," she said. "At the next mountain, she receives a better map. Should she beat the earlier traveler for not carrying paper she had never been given? She should still take responsibility. Yes, responsibility says, I see the harm. I will repair what I can. I will choose differently when the road appears again. Shame says, I must keep the earlier traveler suffering so everyone knows I disapprove of her." Anika watched the lake. What if forgiving myself makes the mistake seem unimportant? Has punishment made it more important? The question rested between them. Suri told her about a woman who crossed a mountain during winter and became lost. In fear, she abandoned part of her luggage and followed a stream down to safety. Years later, she returned during summer and criticized every decision she had made in the snow. "Why did I not see the easier trail?" she asked. Because the trail had been hidden. Why did I leave useful things behind? Because she had been cold and frightened. Why did I not behave like the person I am today? because that person had not yet completed the journey. The woman eventually placed a stone beside the stream in gratitude to the frightened traveler who had done enough to survive. Anika closed her eyes. She pictured her earlier self standing upon an old road. The younger woman looked tired, guarded, and less certain than Anika remembered. She was not a villain waiting to be prosecuted. She was a traveler holding an incomplete map. "I wish you had chosen differently," Anika told her silently. "But I understand why you were afraid. I will carry what you learned." The scene did not disappear. It became quieter, as though placed at its proper distance. If an earlier version of you is walking through your mind tonight, perhaps you can meet them without beginning another trial. You may acknowledge what happened. You may regret what needs regretting. You may repair what remains repairable. And you may stop requiring yesterday's traveler to possess today's map. They brought you this far. You may thank them for surviving the road and allow them to rest. Near the main temple door sat a row of sealed wooden boxes. Each bore the name of a month, but none had a lock. "What is kept inside?" Anika asked. "Seeds," Suri replied, "and patience." Every winter, the gardeners sorted seeds for the coming seasons. A novice named Taro once worried that some would not grow. He opened the spring boxes repeatedly to inspect them. He counted the seeds, rearranged them, and searched for signs of life. Finding none, he worried more. One night, he split a seed with a knife to see whether the future plant was healthy inside. In the morning, the gardener found him surrounded by broken shells. "I needed to know which ones would live," Taro said. The gardener held up the divided seed. "And now you know this one will not." She explained that a seed's future could not be inspected without disturbing the very process that might reveal it. The box was not hiding an answer from him. It was protecting a time that had not arrived. Together they gathered the remaining seeds. The gardener closed the lid and placed the box back on the shelf. "We will open it when the soil is ready," she said. Spring did not produce every plant Taro hoped for. Some seeds failed. Some grew in unexpected corners after birds carried them away. One flower appeared months later than its label promised. Taro learned that uncertainty was not always a problem to penetrate. Sometimes it was a covering beneath which life was quietly forming. Suri rested her hand on the box marked for the coming month. Tomorrow is sealed in the same merciful way. The tired mind wants to open it early. It takes out imagined conversations, imagined news, imagined difficulties, and turns them over beneath the harsh light of midnight. But these are not tomorrow. They are pictures drawn by a mind that lacks tomorrow's information, energy, weather, help, and perspective. Return them to the box. You are not refusing responsibility. You are protecting the seed from being cut open by worry. There will be a time to plan. There will be a time to answer messages, make appointments, examine accounts, and choose a direction. That time is not hidden forever. It is simply not now. Anika imagined a small wooden box beside her bed. Into it she placed the next morning, still unopened. She placed the week beyond it into a larger box. The questions did not vanish. They became seeds rather than alarms. Suri extinguished one of the lamps near the door. "Darkness is useful to seeds," she said. "Darkness is useful to you as well. Not everything grows under constant inspection. Some healing occurs when no one is watching. Some understanding assembles itself while the conscious mind is elsewhere. Some answers become simpler after the body has slept. Let the box remain closed. Let tomorrow remain unopened. Nothing needs to be solved tonight." Suri poured the last of the jasmine tea. The pot held exactly enough for 2 small cups. "Now we come to tomorrow," she said. Anika smiled. I wondered when it would arrive. It has not. Above the lake, clouds crossed the lower edge of the moon. The sky darkened and brightened without hurry. Suri described a village where every household received a sealed parcel before the new year. The parcel contained seeds suitable for the coming season. People were asked not to open it until the first day of planting. One farmer worried that his parcel might contain the wrong seeds. He opened one corner to check. Then, he worried that some seeds might be damaged, so he emptied them onto a table. To make sure they would grow, he planted several indoors during winter. They sprouted too early and weakened before the fields were warm. His neighbor left her parcel closed. She prepared her tools, repaired a fence, and rested during the cold months. When planting day arrived, she opened the parcel and met the seeds in the season that could hold them. Tomorrow is often treated like that parcel, Suri said. We open it in darkness, spread its contents across the bed, and demand that uncertain seeds prove themselves before morning. But some preparation is necessary. Repair the fence, put the tools where you can find them, then leave the seeds sealed. Anika named what she had already done. Her return route was known. The important message had been sent. Her belongings were beside the sleeping mat. No emergency required her attention. Everything else belonged to unopened mourning. You may quietly name what has already been prepared for your own tomorrow. The alarm may be set. The appointment may be written. The close may be near enough. The task may exist without being performed now. Preparation has an ending. Beyond that ending, let the parcel remain closed. You do not need to plant tomorrow's seeds during the night. Let tomorrow remain unopened. Let tomorrow remain unopened. Morning will know how to open itself. Before the last watch began, Suri took Anika through a gate in the eastern wall. It opened onto a garden where night-blooming flowers rose among dark leaves. Their pale petals seemed to hold light rather than reflect it. This garden is kept closed during the day, Suri said. Long ago, a young caretaker named Bo believed that a closed garden was a neglected garden. He opened the gate at sunrise, invited visitors inside, and worked constantly among the beds. He loosened soil around every root. He turned each pot so all sides received equal sun. He brushed dust from leaves and removed petals the moment they began to fade. The garden looked immaculate, but the night flowers stopped opening. Bo added water and richer soil. He placed lanterns among the plants so he could continue working after sunset. Still the buds remained tight. An old gardener came to visit. She watched Bo adjust a stake beside one sleeping flower. "When is the garden alone?" she asked. "Why would a garden need to be alone?" The old gardener extinguished the lanterns and closed the gate from the outside. Bo objected. There were weeds to remove, stems to inspect, and soil that might become dry before morning. "If the garden cannot survive one night without your hands," she said, "your hands have not been caring for it." They left it in darkness. Bo slept badly. He imagined broken stems, thirsty roots, and insects eating every leaf. Before dawn, the old gardener returned with him. When they opened the gate, dozens of pale flowers had unfolded beneath the stars. Their fragrance filled the path. The garden had not been idle while closed. Roots had drawn water. Petals had opened. Moths had carried pollen between flowers. Processes hidden by daylight had resumed when Bo stopped interrupting them. After that, the eastern gate closed every evening. Bo still cared for the garden. He watered when the soil was dry, supported weak stems, and removed what was diseased. But he learned that care included intervals of absence. "The self is also a night garden," Suri said. "You may believe that healing, learning, or preparing must be supervised continuously. The mind stays inside with a lantern, examining every route. But some work requires the gate to close. Memory is sorted during sleep. The body regulates itself in darkness. Emotions change when they are not questioned every few minutes. Perspective grows in places the conscious mind cannot reach with a tool. Tonight, leave the garden alone. You have watered what you could. You have supported what you noticed. Anything requiring daylight may wait behind the gate. Anika breathed in the fragrance of the open flowers. None had needed encouragement at the moment of blooming. The petals were not lazy during the hours they remained closed. They were protecting a movement, too quiet for display. Perhaps sleep is not an interruption of your life. Perhaps it is where part of your life continues beyond observation. Suri closed the eastern gate behind them. Through its carved openings, the pale flowers remained faintly visible. Anika did not feel she was abandoning them. She felt she was giving them back their night. Give the body back its night. Give the mind back its darkness. Let the hidden garden do what hidden gardens do. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Let tomorrow remain unopened. When they reached the water again, the temple attendants were beginning the last watch. They moved quietly along the shore, trimming wicks and shielding each flame with a hand. No one tried to make the lanterns brighter than necessary. Their purpose was not to defeat the darkness. It was to offer enough light for the next few steps. Suri and Anika sat beside an attendant named Kavi, who cared for the oldest lantern. Its metal frame was dented, and one pane of glass had been replaced with a piece of pale shell. Kavi explained that, as a boy, he had believed devotion meant keeping every temple lantern burning until dawn. During his first watch, he ran from flame to flame, adding oil long before it was needed. He feared that if even one went dark, he had failed the night. Near midnight, the chief attendant found him exhausted and nearly out of oil. She extinguished half the lanterns herself. Kavi was horrified. "Listen," she said. With fewer flames hissing, he heard frogs at the edge of the lake, wind in the grass, and water beneath the landing. "The darkness is also keeping watch," she told him. "You are not the only guardian here." She showed him how to tend one lantern and then sit down. When its wick shortened, he trimmed it. When its oil ran low, he added enough. Between those moments, he rested. The moon lit the path where no lantern stood. Stars marked the open sky. Travelers carried lamps of their own. By dawn, Kavi understood that care did not mean continuous interference. Suri looked across the lake. Several lanterns now floated as small islands of amber amid the blue darkness. "The mind keeps a similar watch," she said. "It believes vigilance prevents loss. It checks the body for danger. It checks relationships for change. It checks tomorrow for threats. Even in a safe room, it moves from lantern to lantern, adding oil. Thank it for trying to protect you. Then tell it the watch has changed. The bed is holding the body. The walls are keeping their places. The night is continuing without instruction. Other people are living their own hours. You do not have to keep every flame in their lives burning. Choose one lantern, the simple sensation of breathing. Tend only this. No need to make the breath deeper. Notice when it arrives. Notice when it leaves. Between breaths, there is a tiny unguarded space. Nothing is lost there. If the mind runs toward another lantern, guide it back without anger. A guard who has worked for years does not sit down after one instruction. Speak kindly. The watch is over. You may rest now. Again, the watch is over. The darkness is not an enemy. It is part of the shelter. Kavi lowered the wick of the old lantern. Its light became smaller and warmer. The moon remained broad on the lake. Along the steps, Mira still sat with her back toward them. The breeze moved a few strands of her pale hair. She seemed neither awake nor asleep, only entirely unhurried. Anika felt no need to know who she was. Some presences can remain unnamed. Some stories can wait beyond the edge of one night. One by one, the attendants finished their work and departed. The lake did not become empty. It became spacious. The last watch belonged now to moonlight, water, trees, and the quiet intelligence of sleep. Before leaving the shore, Suri told Anika one final story about the monastery's first night keeper. His name was Dev, and he had been chosen because he was alert, responsible, and almost incapable of resting. On his first night, 3 visitors came to the gate. The first arrived carrying a heavy sack. "These are all the tasks your monastery has not completed," the visitor said. "You should wake everyone so they can begin." Dev opened the sack. It contained repairs for next summer, wood to be cut before winter, letters awaiting answers, and plans for ceremonies not yet announced. He nearly rang the bell. Then he remembered that sleeping hands could not do tomorrow's work well if they were summoned for work that did not exist tonight. He placed the sack beneath the gatehouse roof. "Return after breakfast," he said. The visitor complained, but eventually lay down beside the sack and fell asleep. The second visitor arrived carrying a mirror. "This contains every mistake made within these walls," she said. "You must examine them so they are never repeated." Dev looked into the mirror and saw careless words, forgotten duties, broken bowls, impatience, pride, and moments when kindness had arrived too late. He felt ashamed on behalf of the entire monastery. Then he noticed that the mirror showed no lessons learned, no apologies, and no hands cleaning up what had been broken. It reflected errors, but not the life surrounding them. Dev covered it with a cloth. "We will look in daylight, when the reflection includes more than blame." The second visitor sat beside the first and soon fell asleep. The third visitor came empty-handed. "I bring what may happen before dawn," he whispered. This frightened Dev most of all, because an empty hand could conceal anything. He imagined storms, illness, fire, thieves, and 100 nameless emergencies. He walked the walls twice. Nothing was wrong. Still the visitor waited. At last, Dev opened the gate a little wider. "If something happens, the bell is here, and I am here. Until then, you have brought me nothing." The third visitor smiled and vanished into the dark. Dev sat between the unopened sack and the covered mirror. He expected to remain vigilant until sunrise. Instead, he heard the night in layers, crickets near the wall, a night bird in the cedar, rainwater moving through a channel, someone breathing softly in a nearby room. He understood that keeping watch did not mean imagining every danger. It meant being present enough to meet what actually arrived. Nothing else arrived. At dawn, the first visitor woke and discovered that half the tasks in the sack were no longer necessary. The second uncovered the mirror, and morning light revealed repairs that darkness had hidden. Dev rang the waking bell once. He had protected the monastery not by keeping everyone awake, but by allowing the night to remain a night. Suri looked toward the silent bell pavilion. "You have been your own night keeper for a long time," she said to Anika. "You may leave the post now. Perhaps 3 visitors are waiting near your own gate, the sack of unfinished tasks, the mirror of yesterday's mistakes, the empty hands of imagined danger. Place the sack beneath shelter. Cover the mirror until daylight becomes kinder. Ask the third visitor what has actually happened. If the answer is nothing, let nothing be enough. Should the night genuinely require you, you can wake. You do not need to remain awake in advance. The body possesses its own bell. It knows how to sound when necessary. You may stop pulling the rope to test it. Anika imagined stepping down from the gatehouse. She removed an invisible cloak from her shoulders and hung it on a wooden peg. The monastery continued breathing. The trees did not require inspection. The moon did not require protection from clouds. The lanterns did not interpret darkness as failure. For the first time in many nights, Anika felt that sleep was not abandoning her responsibilities. It was one of them. Rest would return her to the gate in daylight, with steadier hands and clearer sight. Until then, the post could remain empty. The watch is over. The watch is over. You may leave the post now. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Let tomorrow remain unopened. Suri rose to make one final round of the lanterns. Anika walked with her, though the stories had become difficult to hold in order. Details drifted apart. The merchant and the bell, the empty boat, the repaired cup and the hidden bridge seemed to belong to one long dream already beginning. That was all right. Stories do not have to be remembered to offer company. At the first lantern, Suri trimmed the wick. The flame became smaller, steadier. At the second, she cleaned a faint mark from the glass. At the third, nothing needed doing. She simply looked and continued. Anika began to understand that this was how thoughts could be met. Some required one small action. Some needed a little cleaning around the edges. Some needed nothing. The lanterns extended around the pavilion and across the bridge. Their reflections reached downward into dark water, long lines of amber loosening and joining with each slow ripple. The moon remained large above the mountains. Clouds moved beneath it. The aurora flowed so slowly that it seemed still until one looked away and returned. Lotus leaves rose and settled. Thin mist travelled near the far shore. Mira remained upon the steps, facing away, watching the same moon. You do not need to follow closely now. The words can become another quiet movement in the room. A lantern, a reflection, a cloud passing the moon. There is nothing to solve, nothing to complete before rest. The bell has not rung. The river carries its own water. The empty boat passes without an argument. The reflection trembles, and the lantern remains whole. The lotus works quietly inside the bud. Tomorrow's jars remain empty beside the well. The unfinished letter rests folded in its box. The windows are open. The small stone has been removed. The next bridge stone is visible. The guests are leaving in their own time. The cracked cup still holds the moon. Yesterday's traveller has put down the map. Tomorrow remains unopened. At the final lantern, Suri lowered the flame until its glow became soft enough for sleep. The night can keep watch now, she said. The final path passed a small garden of pale sand and dark stones. Curved lines had been raked around each stone like water flowing around islands. A few leaves had fallen across the pattern. Anika imagined the gardener returning with a rake, but Suri sat beside the untidy edge. "A master once cared for this garden," she said. "Every evening he drew the lines before the temple closed." The work was slow and beautiful, yet each morning wind had altered the sand and scattered leaves across it. The master began returning after midnight to protect his design. Whenever wind erased a line, he raked it again. Whenever a leaf fell, he removed it before another could follow. He became angry with the trees for being alive. One night his teacher found him crouched in the garden with the rake. "Who is this pattern for?" she asked. "For those who see it in the morning." "Then let morning see what night has added." She took the rake from him and laid it beside the wall. By dawn, wind had softened the rigid curves. A branch had drawn a delicate line across one corner. Red leaves rested beside the black stones. Visitors called it the most beautiful arrangement the garden had ever held. The master understood that his work ended when evening ended. What happened afterward was not damage to his effort. It was the night contributing its own hand. From then on, he raked carefully and left willingly. Some mornings the garden was almost unchanged. Other mornings it looked entirely different. He responded to what was there rather than grieving what the wind had erased. "You also make patterns through the day," Suri said. "You arrange plans, conversations, belongings, and expectations. You try to leave tomorrow a clear design. Then, night wind moves through the mind. A memory lands where you did not place it. A dream draws across the sand. An answer changes shape while you are not looking. This is not always damage. The sleeping mind may soften lines that waking effort made too rigid. It may place distant things beside each other and discover a relationship you could not plan. Leave the rake beside the wall. The pattern is complete enough for evening. You are not required to preserve today unchanged until morning. Let sleep rearrange what it knows how to rearrange. Let forgotten leaves fall where they fall. Let the sharp line around one difficult thought become softer at its edges." Anika looked at the scattered garden again. The fallen leaves did not appear careless now. They appeared like small boats arriving on a pale shore. One moved when the breeze returned, travelled a short distance, and settled near another stone. No one corrected it. The whole garden remained peaceful. Your mind may change shape during the night without losing itself. Your plans may meet the morning differently arranged. Your identity does not depend on holding every line in place. Suri leaned the rake more securely against the wall. A tool may rest without forgetting its purpose. So may you. The hands that work today can lie empty. The mind that arranged today can allow the wind. Morning will bring a new pattern, and morning hands can meet it. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Let tomorrow remain unopened. Suri led Anika to a sheltered platform at the end of the lotus garden. A woven mat and a folded blanket waited there, as if the temple had known a tired traveler would arrive. "There are no more teachings to collect," Suri said. "Now let the body understand what the stories have been saying." Anika lay down. The platform held her weight without asking how far she had traveled or whether she had used the day wisely. Above the open roof, stars drifted behind a thin band of cloud. The great moon appeared to move with them, although it remained where it was. Suri sat nearby, her voice becoming quieter. Begin by noticing every place where the body is already supported. The back of the head may be supported by a pillow. The shoulders may be supported by the mattress. The arms, the hips, the legs, and the heels are being held in ways that require no effort from you. You do not have to push yourself into the bed. Gravity has remembered the way. Let the forehead become broad beneath the cool night. The forehead has worked enough today. It does not need to hold the shape of concentration. Let the small muscles around the eyes loosen. The eyes have looked outward for many hours. They may turn toward darkness now. There is nothing to inspect behind closed eyelids. Let the cheeks soften. Let the jaw hang in the position it chooses when it is not preparing an answer. The tongue can rest heavily and quietly. It has no sentence to finish. Feel the throat, through which so many spoken and unspoken words have passed. Nothing is waiting there now. The next breath knows how to cross without help. Allow the shoulders to drop one small distance, not toward perfection, only away from guarding. If they rise again, let them rise. Then notice when they become tired of lifting and descend by themselves. Feel the arms growing less interested in action. The upper arms, the elbows, the forearms, the wrists, the palms of the hands. Each finger can loosen from the day. You do not need to hold the ball that has gone down river. You do not need to pull the empty boat toward shore. You do not need to keep every lantern alight. Let the hands be empty. Notice the chest moving beneath its own quiet rhythm. No breath must be impressive. No breath must resemble the last. Some arrive a little deeper. Some remain near the surface. The body adjusts without consulting the worried mind. Feel the heart area not as a problem to investigate, but as a room in the guest house. Whatever feeling is there may have the room for tonight. Sadness may lie down. Relief may lie down. Loneliness may lie down. Hope may lie down. Nothing has to leave before you sleep. Let awareness move gently toward the belly. This is often where tomorrow stores its unopened boxes. You may imagine carrying each box back to the temple shelf. The morning box, the conversation box, the decision box, the box containing things you cannot control at all. Set them down without opening the lids. The belly may rise into the space they occupied. The belly may fall. There is room. Feel the lower back and hips growing heavier. They do not need to brace for the next step on the misty bridge. No bridge is being crossed now. Only this plank exists, the bed beneath you. It is enough. Let the thighs release their hidden effort. Let the knees rest without carrying direction. Let the calves become quiet beneath the skin. The feet have reached the temple. The path will not be offended if you stop walking. Feel each heel surrender its small remaining weight. Let the toes become still. From the top of the head to the soles of the feet, the body is permitted to be one resting landscape. If one place remains tense, do not make it an outsider. Give tension a room as well. You can sleep beside an unfinished feeling. You can sleep beside an unfinished thought. You can sleep before every part of the body has received the message. Suri became silent for several breaths. Across the water, a fish disturbed the surface once, and the rings widened into darkness. A lantern reflected in each moving curve, then returned to one long thread of light. Anika's mind offered another memory. She recognized the guest and did not rise to greet it. The memory sat quietly near the wall. Another thought asked whether she would remember these teachings in the morning. Suri seemed to hear it. "You do not have to remember sleep," she whispered. "You only have to allow it. What is useful will remain in its own way. The river does not memorize every turn in order to reach the sea. Let the teachings become background now. The bell, the arrows, the bowl, the empty boat, the lantern reflected in disturbed water, the lotus that did not hurry, the jars belonging to tomorrow's men, the unsent letter, the house breathing through open windows, the little stone removed from the sandal, the bridge revealing one plank at a time, the guest house larger than its guests, the moon remaining whole in the broken cup, yesterday's traveller receiving tea instead of judgment, the seed protected by its unopened box, the last attendant discovering that darkness also keeps watch. They are no longer lessons to understand. They are lanterns becoming smaller behind you as the boat drifts into sleep. The boat is tied safely. It rocks only a little. Closer to shore, farther from shore, closer again. There is no destination to reach. The rocking itself is enough. High above the lake, a faint line of light crossed the stars and disappeared. It made no demand to be seen again. The cloud moved beyond the moon. Mira remained seated on the distant steps, facing the water. Her hair lifted once in the breeze and settled along the back of her robe. She did not turn. The mystery of her could remain unopened too. The night was full of things that did not need explaining. The depth of the lake, the path of a falling star, the hidden roots beneath a lotus, the moment in which waking becomes sleep. You do not need to witness that moment. You do not need to perform it correctly. Sleep is not a door you must force open. It is the room that appears when you stop standing guard in the hallway. The watch is over. The watch is over. The darkness knows what to do. Anika returned to the small room behind the pavilion. The folded blanket waited upon the mat. The bowl of water reflected a narrow piece of moonlight. Beyond the open window, the lake moved in quiet darkness. She lay down. Her heel was protected by the bandage. Her bag rested near the wall. The letter remained in its wooden box. The bell would ring when dawn arrived, not before. Anika did not ask whether she would sleep. She did not pull at the petals. She allowed the surface beneath her to hold the weight she had been carrying. Her hands rested. Her jaw softened. The space around her eyes became easier. A thought entered the guest house. Tomorrow's road. It could rest near the wall. Another thought entered. The unanswered message. It had no reply tonight. A memory crossed the open window. It did not need to be pushed out. The room was large enough for it to continue through. Outside, the water moved and the reflections moved with it. The lanterns did not break. The moon did not break. The temple did not break. The picture changed upon the water, and everything essential remained. You may rest here too. Let the body become heavier where it is supported. Let the breath remain ordinary. There is no perfect rhythm to find. Breathing in without needing to take more than arrives. Breathing out without needing to push anything away. The next breath knows when to come. The next breath knows when to leave. You do not have to supervise it. The lake does not ask each ripple where it is going. The sky does not count the clouds. The lotus does not measure the distance to morning. And you do not need to measure the distance to sleep. Resting is already enough. Listening is no longer required. The words may become softer at the edges. Lantern light upon water, moonlight upon the floor. A breeze touching the ends of Mira's hair. Clouds traveling without luggage. Mist moving without a destination. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. The mind may still offer one more plan. Thank it for trying to help. Tell it the tools are ready. Tell it the well will still be there. Tell it morning has not asked for its water yet. One small bowl is enough. One visible stone is enough. One ordinary breath is enough. The night becomes quieter. The lanterns become smaller beyond the window. The moon travels slowly above the mountains. No one is hurrying it. No one is asking the lotus to open. No one is asking the lake to become perfectly still. The water is allowed to be water. The mind is allowed to be a mind. And you are allowed to rest before everything is finished. Tomorrow can arrive with unopened seeds. Tomorrow can carry new information. Tomorrow can meet the person you become after rest. For now, the bridge disappears into mist. Only this stone remains. Only this breath, only the quiet weight of the blanket, only the distant movement of water. Anika heard a final small sound from the lake, a lotus leaf settling after the breeze. She did not name it. She did not follow it. The sound ended by itself. Then another silence began. Not an empty silence. A silence holding the bridge, the pavilion, the mountains, and the great moon. A silence holding every unfinished thing without demanding its completion. A silence wide enough for thought and wider than thought. Within that silence, imagine the lake becoming broader than the edges of the picture in the mind. The far shore grows indistinct. The mountains lose their sharp outlines. The difference between water and sky becomes less important. One lantern remains visible. Its reflection reaches toward you, but you do not need to reach back. The reflection shortens when the water rises and lengthens when the water falls. It never worries about maintaining one shape. Let your breathing have that same freedom, shorter if it wishes, longer if it wishes, pausing for the small natural moment that belongs between one movement and the next. There is no correct shape to preserve. Perhaps the body feels heavy now. Let heaviness be the earth drawing you closer. Perhaps the body feels light or distant. Let lightness be mist lifting over the lake. Perhaps one part still feels restless. Let restlessness be a leaf turning once upon the surface, carried without effort toward quieter water. Every condition has somewhere to belong in this landscape. You do not need to select the right one. The monastery has room for the wakeful and the sleeping. The moon shines on the open flower and the closed bud. The lake carries the clear reflection and the broken one. Nothing about this moment disqualifies you from rest. If the mind asks for another story, let the night answer with water. If it asks for certainty, let the bridge offer one plank. If it asks whether you have done enough, let the empty hands answer. If it asks when sleep will come, let the lotus remain closed without apology. The questions may become quieter, or they may continue for a while. Either way, the listener beneath them is not required to speak. Anika no longer knew whether Suri was beside the platform. She did not open her eyes to check. Trust didn't arrive as a grand feeling. It arrived as the absence of checking. The lake was still there without being watched. The lantern was still there without being counted. Mira remained somewhere on the steps, her face still belonging to another night and another story. Nothing had been lost by leaving it unseen. The night held its mysteries gently. Let yourself become one of them. Not a problem hidden in darkness. A life being quietly restored there. No audience, no measurement, no need to notice the exact moment restoration begins. Only the distant water. Only the wide moon. Only the bed beneath you, already doing all the holding that this moment requires. Rest beneath that silence. Let the remaining words become softer than the story that brought you here. You do not need to carry Anika's journey any farther. She is resting beneath the moon. Suri has finished tending the teachings. The lamps know how to burn without being watched. The path behind them may disappear into mist. That is all right. You are not traveling backward tonight. The path ahead may also remain hidden. That is all right too. You are not traveling forward tonight. For this quiet interval, there is only the place where the body has come to rest. If another thought arrives, let it sit beside the lake. It may watch the moon without speaking. If another feeling arrives, give it the blanket's edge. There is enough shelter. If the mind returns to counting time, let the numbers become lanterns drifting too far away to read. one light, then another, then only a warm distance across the water. No clock is needed inside the monastery. The night is not late or early. It is simply the night. Breath continues beneath it. The heart continues beneath it. Hidden roots continue beneath the lotus bed. You may join all those quiet things that work without conscious effort. Nothing important depends upon your remaining alert for one more minute. Let attention become less precise. Let the edges of words become less important. Let the lake, the sky, and the dark room slowly belong to the same gentle distance. No need to notice when one image fades. No need to replace it. What remains is enough. Let yesterday's traveler sleep. Let tomorrow's traveler wait for morning. Let the person here now do nothing at all. The lanterns are keeping watch. The night is carrying the river. The unopened lotus is doing its hidden work. You do not need to remain awake to help any of them. Breathing in, breathing out. The reflection loosens. The water settles as much as it wishes. The cloud passes the moon. The window remains open. The guest house grows quiet. One visitor leaves, then another. No need to count them. No need to wait for the last. Sleep may enter before the room is empty. Sleep may enter while a thought is still sitting near the wall. Sleep does not require perfect silence. It asks only that you stop guarding the door. So let the door remain where it is. Let the night come and go through the open windows. Let the lantern burn softly. Let tomorrow remain unopened. Let tomorrow remain unopened. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. And there is nowhere else you need to be.